Hi, I'm Rowena. My parents bought my twin sister a lake house for graduation. Me? I got a smile and silence. But that wasn't the first time they made me feel like a guest in my own family. It's just the one they couldn't hide. They used my name to get that house. My ideas to build her cafe. My dream. With her name on it. And then I won the lottery. With a ticket they threw in the trash. You ever wonder what happens when the quiet one finally stops being quiet? The room was blooming with pastel colors, white roses curling up on the edges of napkins, and strings of silver balloons that spelled out one name only. Congratulations, Maris. Her name shimmered from the banners, from the menu cards, even the printed cake topper. I scanned the space again, but there wasn't a single trace of me. Not a single shared memory. Not even a to our daughters kind of sentiment. Maris stood at the front of the Lakeview Lodge banquet room in a white sheath dress, grinning like she'd just won a pageant. Maybe she had. In a way, she always did. Our parents stood beside her, Evelyn in her signature beige and pearls, Warren with one hand on her shoulder, looking proud in the way he never looked at me. The guests, mostly extended family and neighbors, clapped as my mother raised her glass. I know we all came here to celebrate a milestone, she began, her voice smooth like a practiced MC. And as parents, we wanted to do something special for our Maris. Something meaningful. The words drifted around me like fog. I had a weird hunch where this was going, but part of me still hoped, irrationally, that there'd be something for me too. Even a nod, a glance, a damn cupcake. Evelyn smiled wider. Maris, we're giving you the keys to your future, your very own lake house on Beaver Lake. Paid in full. Cheers erupted. Camera phones flew up. A cousin squealed. Someone yelled, "No way!" I sat at a side table near the water station, holding a glass of lukewarm punch. My fingers tightened around the cup. Every eye was on her, and none of them blinked my way. Maris gasped, hands clasping her cheeks. Mom! Dad! Are you serious? Of course we are, baby, Warren said, pulling her into a hug. You've earned it. I waited. I kept waiting. For a second announcement. A second key. Even a joke. And Rowena gets the boat. Something dumb but sweet. But Evelyn walked past my table, patted my shoulder like I was a coworker who forgot to RSVP. She leaned in and whispered, You'll get there. When you've earned something. That was it. No speech, no name on the banner, no gift, no cake. Just silence. My own sister didn't even notice. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my old twin bed in the room that used to have posters and baking books, now stripped bare like it had been waiting for me to move out and vanish. I traced the chipped wood of the dresser, the one I'd painted lavender in 9th grade. My trophies, local baking competitions, school honors, had been stored in boxes in the attic for years, while Maras's ribbons hung proudly along the staircase wall. I thought about all the times I'd quietly hoped for some acknowledgement. When I made honor roll every semester and got told, well, Maris had tougher classes. When I baked a wedding cake for Aunt Libby's reception, and no one even remembered to reimburse me for the ingredients. Now the cherry on top? Maris had plans to open a wellness cafe. In the lake house. My dream, a cozy lakeside bakery, turned into a sanitized smoothie bar with eucalyptus towels and kale chips. And they were funding her fully. Later, out in the backyard during golden hour photos, I was adjusting the strap of my dress when the photographer waved me aside. Let's just do the parents and Maris for this one, he said, not even glancing at me. I stood there, a few feet away, watching them huddle together, all smiles and sunshine. Evelyn adjusted Maris's hair. Warren kissed her temple. A perfect little frame. Their ideal family. Not forgotten. Deleted. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, I'd slipped away without a word. I drove aimlessly until I ended up parked near the edge of Beaver Lake, where the house, her house, stood like a smug promise of everything I was never meant to have. My phone buzzed. Group chat. Evelyn, Thanks everyone for coming to Maris's big day. So proud of her. No mention of me, not even a typo. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared out at that stupid house, the water glinting behind it like a punchline. I reached back and popped the trunk. My old duffel bag sat there, half packed with clothes and my baking tools. Just in case. What would happen if I just drove away and didn't come back? The engine had long cooled by the time I finally drove away from the lake. I didn't go home that night. Not really. I ended up at the apartment I shared with two girls I barely saw, changed into sweatpants, and collapsed into bed with my shoes still on. I didn't check my phone again. I didn't unpack. 2 days passed in a kind of slow drift. I didn't call anyone. No one called me. The group chat stayed quiet on my end, but I watched the messages pile up. Maris posting updates about her new beginning. Evelyn commenting with strings of heart emojis. That morning, I made coffee in silence, watching the steam rise like fog off a cold lake. My hands moved on instinct, measuring, stirring, but I didn't actually bake anything. I didn't want to. Around noon, I opened Instagram. I shouldn't have, but I did. Maris had posted a reel, a walkthrough of the new wellness space, soft piano playing, white curtains billowing, an oak countertop identical to the one I'd sketched 3 years ago. Her caption read, "From vision to reality, share Lakeview life." The logo, the layout, even the handwritten font was the same as the one I used when I mock-designed my dream bake cabin on Canva. And then I saw it, my words. A line I'd whispered over dinner one night, too shy to say it louder. Home is where you can taste your memories. I felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. My mouth opened, but nothing came. I closed the app and stared at the blank counter. My recipe notebook, the one I hadn't opened in months, sat nearby. Closed, shut tight like a wound. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood still for a long time. Hours later, I walked down to the corner store for no real reason. I passed the old printer shop on Haywood Street, the kind that still does trifold menus and birthday banners. A new flyer caught my eye in the window. Grand opening, Lakeview Organic Cafe, mindful eating by the water. I stepped closer. The menu listed a memory scone, lemon thyme with a cardamom glaze. My recipe, a twist on my grandmother's old Sunday treat. Another item called Sunday Morning Muffins. Same name I used in my college bake sale lineup. I picked up a flyer from the holder and turned it over. There it was, a stylized quote in gold foil. Mine. I didn't rip it. I didn't march inside and make a scene. I folded it slowly, creasing the edges with the flat of my thumb, and slid it into my coat pocket. That walk home felt different. On the way, a memory pulled at me, one I hadn't touched in years. It was our 10th birthday. Mary's had begged for a princess party. I didn't care much. I just wanted matching dresses. We used to have those. Matching clothes, matching cups, matching bedtime stories. But that year, they gave her a brand new ruffled dress in cotton candy pink. I got nothing. Evelyn told me, "You've always had more of a tomboy thing, right? Jeans are your vibe." I remember watching Maris spin in the backyard, people clapping like she was on stage. I stood next to the fence wearing last year's jeans, hands shoved in the pockets. A neighbor asked, "Aren't you twins?" I pretended I didn't hear. Even back then, I understood something they never said out loud. We might have been born on the same day, but we weren't growing up in the same story. Back in the apartment, I finally opened the recipe book. On the inside cover was a sketch I made in college. A lakeside bakery with tall windows and an herb garden out front. It wasn't fancy. It was mine. I had shown it to Mom once. She chuckled and said, "That's cute, honey. But who's gonna buy bread that fancy in a town like this?" Apparently they would, as long as Maris was the one selling it. Later that evening, I sat by the window, the flyer still folded in my hand. I looked out at the street, watching people pass by, living lives that weren't borrowed. I whispered the word out loud. Just once. Enough. I didn't need to yell it. I didn't need to post it. I just needed to mean it. I left the flyer on the windowsill and went to wash the breakfast dishes, not because they were many, but because it gave my hands something to do while my brain sorted through the mess. The sponge dragged across the plate in slow, steady circles. One plate, then a mug, a spoon. When I reached for the trash bag under the sink, the one I'd been meaning to toss since the night of the graduation party, I felt something rigid inside. A small envelope, slightly torn and folded in on itself. I pulled it out, set it on the counter. It was the cheap paper pack I'd filled with scratch-offs and slipped into a card for my parents. A thank you for everything kind of gesture. A peace offering, I guess. Of course, it never got opened. I don't even know why I scratched it. Maybe out of spite or boredom. But I did. 3 identical symbols. I blinked and looked again. No mistake. Then I flipped it over to check the barcode, like I'd seen people do on gas station counters. The instructions were clear. This one wasn't a joke prize. I had to reread it 3 times. My legs felt suddenly weak, and I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge with both hands. It wasn't life-changing in a lottery fantasy kind of way, but it was enough. Enough to stop working weekends at the diner. Enough to open a business account. Enough to pay the culinary school term I'd never imagined affording. I laughed. Not the happy kind. More like the kind you make when a storm breaks and you're already soaked to the bone. I laughed until I had to sit down, and I didn't call them. Not Evelyn, not Warren, not Maris. Instead, I opened my laptop and made an appointment with a local advisor, someone who specialized in new businesses. Then I emailed the registrar at the Culinary Institute I'd bookmarked years ago but never dared apply to. I sent my documents, paid my first term in full. Then I browsed Craigslist and found a second-hand mixer from a bakery closing out in Brevard. I messaged the seller and arranged pickup. It had a few scratches and a dent on the side. That felt right. I didn't want everything to be new. I wanted to remember the feeling of making something from what no one else thought was worth keeping. Later that night, I made tea and sat in the kitchen. I opened the drawer above the oven and pulled out a small round metal tin. One I used to keep sewing needles in. I slipped the winning ticket inside and stuck a bright pink sticky note on the lid. They didn't scratch it. I did. And just like that, something inside me unlatched. I wasn't waiting anymore. Funny thing, about 2 hours later, my phone lit up. Voicemail, Evelyn. Her voice was measured, that polite coldness she used when she didn't want to sound like she was accusing me of something, but still wanted to imply I owed her a call. Hey, Ro. Just checking in. Haven't heard from you. We're still family, you know. Don't shut us out. I didn't hit play a second time. I didn't save the message. I just deleted it and got up to wash my cup. The next morning, I woke early. Not because I had to, but because my brain was still buzzing. I hadn't slept well. Not after that voicemail. I couldn't stop replaying her tone, that polite frost Evelyn always wrapped her real intentions in. It was just past 7 a.m. when I left the apartment, a thermos of coffee in one hand, class notes in the other. The walk to the culinary school downtown was short, maybe 15 minutes, but I always liked giving myself more time. I didn't rush anymore, not now. As I rounded the corner near the bodega across from the school's entrance, I saw him again. Same tan windbreaker, same tired sneakers, same half-smoked cigarette hanging from his lips like it wasn't supposed to be noticed. He didn't make eye contact, but his shoulders twitched when I passed. Subtle, not slick. The third time this week. I stopped, turned around, and walked straight up to him. Lose something? I asked. He blinked like I'd spoken another language. No, just waiting for my niece, he muttered, but his voice cracked on niece. I tilted my head. Which school does she go to? His silence was answer enough. Then he gave it up. Your mom just asked me to keep an eye, that's all. She said you've been making choices that worry her. Wanted to make sure you were safe. That word made my jaw clench. She paid you to stalk me under the excuse of safety? He didn't answer. just shrugged as if that made it fine. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just walked away. When I got to class, I couldn't focus. The sauce reduction instructions blurred. I fumbled with the measuring scales. My instructor noticed but didn't say anything. He just watched, like he sensed I was balancing more than flour and sugar. Later, during my break at the bakery, I checked my phone. Another missed call from Evelyn. For some reason, I picked up when she called back again. Her voice filled the line without pause. Maris got the permits. The cafe is opening next week. The decorator says the lakefront view makes the whole space feel elevated. Don't you think that's just so her? I didn't answer. She didn't wait for me to. Anyway, we're still figuring out the logo. Dad thinks it should be cursive, but I told him sans serif feels more modern. Silence. Then she asked, almost as an afterthought. And you? Still baking? I got into culinary school, I said. A pause. Well, at least we let you stay in that apartment after high school. It's something. That sentence sat in my ear like ash. She hung up before I could respond. Back home that night, I logged into my cloud to update my project notes. That's when I saw it. 3 documents recently opened. All my architectural drafts. The Lakeview remodel file, too. The timestamps were from weeks ago. I hadn't touched them. Someone else had. I checked the IP log. It matched my mother's old account. She must have accessed it through an old shared device from back when I still lived under her roof. They hadn't just dismissed my dreams. They were still digging in them. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I copied every single file to a flash drive, uploaded another copy to a legal archive, changed every password, set up 2-factor authentication. I wasn't afraid of them stealing anymore. I was preparing for what would happen when they tried. The next day, I left a message. Just once. You can stop watching. I know you've been tracking me. I know you opened my designs. If anything I created ends up somewhere it doesn't belong again, you'll wish I had just walked away. That was all. No signature, no warmth. They'd know who it was from. 3 weeks after sending that message, I found myself at a downtown Asheville launch party for a local food blog. I wasn't on the guest list, just tagging along with Jess, one of the girls from my baking class. She said the event might be good for networking, and I figured blending in with a crowd would feel easier than staying home, counting everything my family had taken. The cafe hosting the party was newly renovated, with brushed brass fixtures and reclaimed wood shelves stacked with gluten-free loaves and mason jars of basil lemonade. The kind of place that wanted to be rustic without giving up its polished image. Familiar, in a way I didn't like. I had just grabbed a toothpick skewer of beet hummus crostini when I heard the host clink a glass for attention. We're so excited to feature a dish tonight by one of our favorite up-and-coming food creatives, Maris. Please enjoy her signature balsamic fig tartlets, available at her new cafe next month. The room clapped. I didn't. My body froze, teeth locked around that stupid skewer. Balsamic fig tartlets. No. No, no, no. That was mine. The crust recipe, the almond flour ratio to butter, the touch of rosemary in the reduction, the garnish of sea salt that gave it contrast. Even the name. Signature, they'd called it. But the signature wasn't hers. I didn't stay to hear her speak. I backed out of the room, past the servers carrying trays, past the couple taking selfies under the neon Local First sign. I walked for 3 blocks before I stopped and leaned against the side of an old brick bookstore. My hands trembled, but not from shock. I'd felt this one coming. 2 months earlier, I had let her into my kitchen, again. She'd asked to play around with some plating ideas. I'd made fig compote that night, just messing with texture. She'd said, "This would be cute at the cafe if I ever did sweets." I hadn't thought much of it. I was too tired from class. I labeled the batch with flavor notes, little sticky tags, my shorthand, ratios, prep times. Turns out, she didn't want help. She wanted a test kitchen. Back at my apartment, I didn't scream or call or throw things. I opened my phone and pulled up the photo log from that night. Time-stamped. Ingredients visible. My notes in the corner of the frame. Then I went to my email history, found the thread where she'd asked about fig pairings, and I'd shared flavor theories. I started a new folder on my desktop and called it Lake House Lies. Inside it, I saved photos of every dish I'd prepped, voice memos I'd left myself while testing, copies of text exchanges. I backed it up in 2 places. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Maris, voicemail. Hey, I used your tart idea. Just one time, Ro. It's not a big deal. Let's not make this ugly, okay? No apology. Just, don't make this ugly. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed out a recipe sheet, formal formatting, ingredients measured to the gram. I filled out the copyright form online and mailed the whole thing in with tracking. Just in case. Because just in case didn't sound paranoid anymore. It sounded like something a woman does when she finally knows better. The week after Maurice's voicemail, I stayed busy. I focused on baking orders from a few new clients I picked up online. Nothing huge, but enough to feel the slow burn of independence. I also submitted a microloan application to the local credit union. My plan was to buy a small used trailer, fix it up into a mobile test kitchen. Asheville had the crowd for it, and I was finally ready to move on my own timeline. 3 days later, the call came. "We're sorry, Ms. Granger," the woman on the phone said, her voice too chipper for what came next. "Your loan was denied due to an outstanding mortgage on record. It looks like you already carry a sizable liability." I blinked at the wall. "A what?" She repeated herself. I asked for documentation. She emailed the full summary within the hour. And there it was, printed plain as daylight. A mortgage tied to a lakefront property on Beaver Drive. My name was listed as co-borrower. I don't remember putting down the phone, but I do remember the sound of the paper tearing under my grip right before I dropped it on the counter and grabbed my keys. The credit union sat on a quiet corner off Hendersonville Road. I walked in like I had somewhere to be in 5 minutes, because if I didn't keep moving, I might not move at all. Inside, a man named Brad met me with a practiced smile and a printout of the original application. Signature, Rowena Granger. Only, it wasn't mine. The handwriting was close. Not perfect. And the witness line? My father's. Brad offered to get the loan officer who processed it. I told him no thanks and left before I could throw up in the fake ficus next to the front desk. Back at home, I sat down with a yellow folder and started building the timeline. Pulled my last credit report. Took screenshots of every flagged transaction. Compared signature samples from my license, bank forms, my school registration. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had used me because I had the better credit. Because I'd kept mine clean, paid down a card at a time while juggling rent and classes. I contacted a woman named Patrice at my culinary school's small business clinic. She read through the paperwork and said quietly, "You know this is criminal, right?" I nodded. "And you know, if you don't take this to court, it sets a precedent. They'll do it again." That night, I filled out the civil complaint form. By the next afternoon, I walked into the courthouse and filed it. Financial fraud. Identity misuse. I checked the box for immediate family. The clerk didn't flinch, but I did. Inside. Not from fear. From finally realizing how far they were willing to go just to pretend I didn't matter. The community buzz started almost instantly. A neighbor posted on Facebook, "Pray for families in conflict. It's never too late to heal." Maris tweeted something vague about betrayal and loyalty. Evelyn, true to form, didn't hold back. She left me a voicemail, clipped and brittle. "You sue your own parents? For what? For helping you? You sound like a bitter little girl who doesn't understand how the real world works." I didn't respond. I sent my lawyer a list of witnesses instead. My professors, my advisor, even one former bank clerk I'd remembered helping Dad that year. A few nights later, while on break at the bakery, my phone vibrated until the table danced. Unknown number, voicemail, Maris again. "Hope you're happy, Ro. You've made this ugly." You always do. That same day, she posted a selfie captioned, "Betrayal never comes from strangers." She wasn't wrong. It just wasn't the slam dunk she thought it was. I muted her account, tossed my apron in the wash bin, and stepped out the back door. The air had cooled, sharp and clean like clarity. I walked to the corner bodega and paid my culinary school installment in cash at the Western Union kiosk, under my name, with my account, for my life. After the payment was made, I tucked the receipt in my bag and walked the few blocks to the bakery, not because I needed to be there, my shift had ended hours ago, but because I needed to breathe somewhere that didn't have my name on a lawsuit or a family crest nailed above the door. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, the whispers had gotten louder. People weren't even pretending to whisper anymore. At the grocery store, the post office, even the dog park, I could feel the same questions hanging in the air, like smoke from someone else's fire. Did she really sue her own parents? Over a house? No, it was more than that. Something about a loan, her name, something serious. The local art center was buzzing that Saturday night. Polished wood floors, cheap wine and plastic flutes, local musicians playing banjo near the snack tables. I hadn't planned on going, but a friend had begged me to show up, said it'd be good for my name to be seen in public again, attached to something other than family drama. I stood in the back of the gallery room, half shadowed by a sculpture shaped like a burnt whisk, when the slideshow began. Faces of small business owners, farmers, bakers, chefs, artisans, all celebrated for community entrepreneurship. Then came the slide. There they were, Evelyn, Maris, standing in front of the lake house. The title underneath, Evelyn Granger and Family, Generational Impact in Culinary Innovation. I blinked once. I knew that photo. It had been taken 2 years ago, during a family cookout I had prepped for, styled, and, yes, photographed. I had been in the original, only now I wasn't. They had cropped me out, pasted some flowering bush in my place. Clean, polished, like I'd never existed. People clapped. Someone beside me muttered, "What a lovely family." I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't let a single muscle betray what was bubbling underneath. I left before the applause stopped. Back in my apartment that night, I peeled off my shoes like they were made of lead and slumped into the desk chair. The room glowed with the soft blue light of my laptop. That's when a notification popped up. An email forwarded from Maya, a girl I hadn't seen since high school. Found this. Thought you should know. Attached was a screenshot of an email chain dated 4 years back. Subject: Culinary Scholarship Consideration, Rowena Granger. From: Admissions Office. To Rowena Granger, email.com. The catch? It wasn't my email, it was Evelyn's. Her reply read, "Thank you for the opportunity, but Rowena has decided to pursue a more stable career path and will not be accepting the scholarship offer." I never saw that email, never even knew I'd been offered a spot. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. All those nights I thought I didn't make the cut. All those applications I thought got tossed because I wasn't good enough. Turns out, someone else had done the tossing for me. I didn't cry. I opened the Lake House Lies folder and created a new subfolder, Erased Opportunities. I added the scholarship email, labeled it SCH White 1, pulled up Maris's press release from the community gala, added the edited photo, IMG Doctored, created a spreadsheet, titled it History of Theft. Then I opened a new message to my lawyer. Subject: Subpoena Request, Maternal Email Archive. Body: Please begin the motion to request full access to all Granger family correspondence involving my name. Attached: Documentation, all of it. Later that night, I left the apartment to get some air. I didn't want to pace a hole through the floor. The fundraiser was still going. Lights danced across the roof of the Arts Center, and I could hear laughter drifting into the street. As I passed by the front entrance, I caught sight of Maris near the side stairs, chatting with some guy in a checkered shirt and fake charm. She saw me, froze. "Row!" she started, half walking toward me. "Can we not do this here?" I tilted my head, silent. She looked around, whispered, "Let's not make a scene, okay?" I stepped in close enough for only her to hear. "You don't even know what's coming yet," I said, "but it'll have your name on it, spelled correctly this time." And I walked away. After that final stare down outside the arts center, I didn't wait for anyone's reaction. I went home, pulled out my chef whites, and ironed them slowly, methodically, like I was pressing the memory of her voice out of the fabric. I didn't sleep much that week, not because of anxiety, there wasn't any left, but because I was too focused. Focused like a knife being honed. The Asheville Culinary Festival was coming, and I had secured a slot. Not through family connections, not from pity, just my portfolio, my pitch, my name. The morning of the showcase, the plaza was already buzzing by 8 a.m. Booths lined the sidewalks with handmade signage and seasonal herbs. The smell of roasted garlic and sourdough followed me as I hauled my prep crates to my assigned counter. No banners, no branded hats. Just me, my knives, and a dish no one would expect. It was an old recipe, something my grandmother once made for Sunday supper. I had rewritten it from scratch. No shortcuts, no stolen edits. I called it Reclamation Stew, a slow-cooked, layered blend of wild mushroom confit, smoked barley, and rosemary broth. Each component had its own label on the table: sacrifice, silence, and survival. When the judges walked up, clipboards in hand, I stood straight and waited. "What inspired this dish?" one of them asked, without looking up. I kept my voice even. "Some recipes are built on stolen ingredients," I said. "This one is mine." They wrote something down. I didn't ask what. From the corner of my eye, I spotted Evelyn and Maris near the second-row tent, standing under a shade cloth with sunglasses too big for sincerity. They watched, but didn't approach. Not yet. After I served the final plate and the crowd moved on, I walked toward them. I didn't raise my voice or fake a smile. I simply handed Evelyn a white folder, its seal unbroken. No greeting, no explanation. Inside were copies of the notarized copyright forms for all the recipes they'd pilfered. Screenshots of the bank loan Maris had fraudulently co-signed with my name. And, at the top, a printed record of the scholarship email Evelyn had answered on my behalf, posing as me. I'd added one note: "You have 72 hours to settle, or it goes public." I turned and left before they could say a word. The next morning, I woke to a call from the bank. The lake house was being flagged for foreclosure. Final warning. I opened my laptop, logged into my account, and wired the remaining balance. No memo, no signature, just clean numbers clearing a dirty debt. About an hour later, Evelyn texted a single question mark. I didn't reply. 2 days passed before Maris found me again. I was at Lila's cafe, reviewing a supply order on my laptop. She walked in like she'd been dragged by the wind, hair messy, eyes rimmed red, wearing the same hoodie from 2 days ago. "You did this," she hissed. "I've lost everything. My name, my place, the money, the house." I closed my screen slowly and looked her in the eyes. "I've lost everything. You happy now?" she asked again, louder. A few people glanced our way. I leaned forward slightly. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just done pretending you ever didn't know what you were doing." Her mouth opened, then closed. She blinked like she was trying to summon tears that had dried up days ago. I stood, gathered my things, and left without another word. Behind me, the door jingled once as it shut. I didn't look back when the door closed behind me. Didn't wait to see if Maris followed. I just walked 3 blocks, turned the corner onto Market Street, and headed straight toward the smell of yeast and cinnamon that had become my kind of peace. 3 months later, the bakery was mine. Fully licensed, modest, sun-drenched, and paid for in full under one name, mine. I'd chosen to renovate a small storefront on the edge of downtown, far enough from the lake house to never smell that water again, but close enough to hear praise when it finally came from strangers. Spring crept in slowly that year. Dogwoods bloomed along the sidewalks, their petals dusting the windowsills like powdered sugar. That morning, I stood behind the counter, reviewing the freshly printed seasonal menu. I had named each item with care, each one carrying a story that didn't need retelling. One caught my eye, newly added, right near the bottom. Lake House Pie, inspired by a memory, not a moment. And underneath, in small script, some memories shouldn't be sweet. Customers loved it. They never asked for the backstory. And I never offered it. That was part of the healing, keeping the recipe and letting go of the bitterness. Around mid-morning, I was at the back prepping dough when Nora, one of my teenage assistants, peeked around the flour rack. Ro, there's a couple people across the street, just standing there. I wiped my hands and walked to the front window. Across the road, Evelyn and my father stood near a lamppost. They didn't speak, didn't wave, just stood there like they were trying to summon courage they no longer owned. Dad took half a step forward. Evelyn tugged his sleeve, and they turned away. I didn't move, didn't cry. Just pulled the window latch closed and returned to kneading. That afternoon, a padded envelope arrived in my home mailbox. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Maris had always curled the tops of her letters like she was trying to make them prettier than they were. Her name was in blue ink this time, oddly formal. Inside, I assumed, was some last-ditch monologue. Apology, maybe, maybe not. I placed the envelope in a tin box with other artifacts I didn't need to revisit, shut the lid, slid it into the back of my desk drawer. That part of the story doesn't get rewritten, I whispered. Not this time. That evening, I stayed late to clean the bakery with my small crew. They'd become family without asking for it. People who didn't need to know your history to hold the door open when you had your hands full. As we dimmed the lights, Emma, our barista, surprised me with a cupcake and a song. "You didn't tell us it was your birthday," she teased. "It's not," I said, smiling. "Not technically, but it's the day I started over. That counts." I cut the cupcake into 6 slices and handed them around. "To chosen family," I said. No one needed further explanation. Right before locking up, a woman in a denim jacket ducked inside, blinking at the warm lights. She looked around slowly, breathed in deep. "This place feels like home," she said. I smiled and handed her a small menu card. "That's the idea. And maybe you've lived a little of this story too. Not the exact details. Maybe no lake house, no forged documents, but the quiet dismissals, the unspoken favoritism, the long wait for someone to finally see your worth. I know how it feels to be erased in plain sight. I know how it feels to keep showing up, hoping that one day someone would clap for you too. But here's what I learned. You don't need their applause to matter. You don't need their permission to build something beautiful. And sometimes, the best justice isn't revenge. It's peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from choosing your own voice over their expectations. So, if you're standing at the edge of something hard, a choice, a hurt, a silence, I want to remind you, your story still belongs to you. You get to finish it, not them. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to finally become who you are? Or maybe you're still trying to find that first step. Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from, or just type 1 if this story touched something real in you. And hey, if this video made you feel seen, even just a little, don't forget to subscribe. We've got more stories coming, ones that'll remind you, you're not alone in what you've lived through. You're not broken, you're becoming. Hey there, I'm Serafina. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like realizing your own family sees you as expendable. Not a daughter, not a partner, just a tool to be used and discarded when they're done with you. I spent years proving myself, building a career, saving the very company they swore I'd never be a part of. And what did my father do the second he didn't need me anymore? He erased me. From the company, from the family legacy, like I never even existed. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? He expected me to stay, to accept it, to keep cleaning up after his mistakes, like I always had. And when I refused, he made sure I paid for it. The lies, the manipulation, the threats. The moment I stopped being useful, my own father tried to destroy me. But he underestimated one thing: me. So what do you do when the people who are supposed to love you the most turn against you? How far will they go to keep their power? And how do you walk away from a family that never truly saw you as one of their own? Because trust me, I didn't just walk away. I burned it all to the ground. I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach twist. Reginald Voss. It had been years since I last saw that name light up my phone, and even longer since I had heard his voice. My fingers hovered over the screen. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it ring until it faded into silence. But another part, the part still carrying old wounds that never quite healed, pressed accept. Serafina. His voice was the same as I remembered. Cold, measured, a man who expected to be obeyed. I stayed silent, waiting. I need you back in Chicago. The company is in trouble. That was it. No, how have you been? No, I miss you. Just a command. A sharp laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Of course, this was why he called. The only time Reginald Voss ever acknowledged my existence was when he needed something. And why would I care, Father? There was a pause, a brief hesitation that almost sounded like irritation. Because this is your family's legacy, and family takes care of its own. I scoffed, leaning against the kitchen counter. That's rich coming from you. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then, in the same emotionless tone, he said, "Be at the house by 8. And just like that, the call ended. No request, no option, just a demand. I stared at the screen long after it went dark. Chicago, the Voss estate, the place I swore I'd never return to. But something in his voice unsettled me. Not desperation. Reginald Voss would never allow himself to sound desperate. But something else. Something I couldn't quite place. Against my better judgment, I packed my bag. The estate hadn't changed. The same towering iron gates, the same manicured driveway leading to the grand entrance, the same suffocating weight pressing down on my chest as I stepped inside. But I had changed. I squared my shoulders as I walked through the hallways lined with old portraits. Their eyes followed me, just as they had when I was a child, reminding me of my place in this family. The spare, not the heir. The dining room doors were open, and there they were, seated like royalty at a coronation. Reginald at the head of the table, as always. Lucian beside him, looking smug. My mother, Ilara, at his right, silent as ever. I took my time stepping in, letting my heels click against the marble floor. I wanted them to feel every second of my presence. Reginald barely lifted his gaze. "Sit." I didn't. Lucien smirked. "You're late." I ignored him, crossing my arms. "Let's skip the formalities. Why am I here?" Reginald exhaled through his nose. "We need your expertise." I laughed, shaking my head. "You need my expertise? Since when?" Lucian leaned back in his chair. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. It's just a rough patch." Rough patch. I knew better. I had spent my career fixing other people's financial messes, and if Reginald Voss was calling me, it wasn't a rough patch. It was a disaster. Reginald slid a folder across the table. I hesitated before picking it up. The weight of it felt like a trap before I even opened it. I scanned the first few pages, then the next. My pulse pounded as the truth unraveled before me. The company wasn't struggling. It was collapsing. Lucien had bled it dry. Lavish spending, reckless investments, money funneled into personal accounts under the guise of bonuses. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth, lifting my gaze to my father. "You knew." Reginald met my stare without flinching. "That's why you're here." My fingers tightened around the papers. The realization hit like a slap. He didn't call me because I was family. He didn't call me because I was capable. He called me because I was the last option. I dropped the folder onto the table. Let me get this straight. You ignored me my entire life. Never saw me as your successor. But now that your golden boy screwed up, you suddenly remember I exist? No one spoke. Lucian shifted in his seat, uncomfortable for the first time. My mother stared at her plate, refusing to meet my gaze. Reginald remained still, his face unreadable. I let out a slow breath, forcing my hands to unclench. I had spent years craving their approval, wanting a place at this table, but now all I felt was disgust. I pushed back my chair. Fix it yourself. I turned and walked away, each step feeling lighter than the last. Just as I reached the door, Reginald's voice followed me, sharp as a blade. If you walk away now, Serafina, you will regret it. Regret? She almost laughs. Regret is dedicating your life to proving yourself to a man who never saw you as enough. The cold air outside the Voss estate bites at my skin as I walk toward my car, but I barely feel it. My father's voice still lingers in my mind, as sharp as a blade. If you walk away now, Serafina, you will regret it. I don't turn back. I don't hesitate. For the first time, I don't care. The drive back to my apartment is a blur, my fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My mind spins with all the reasons I should have expected this. This was who my father was. This was who he had always been. By the time I step inside my apartment, exhaustion tugs at my limbs, but sleep doesn't come. I sit in the dimly lit living room, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. I should feel relief. I should feel free. But I don't. The past doesn't just let go that easily. Morning comes too soon. My phone buzzes on the nightstand, and I reach for it instinctively. My breath catches the moment I see the subject line. Board decision, removal of stakeholder status. For a second, I don't move. My fingers hover over the screen, hesitant, as if opening the email will somehow make it more real. But I already know. I already know what this is. I click it. The words are clinical, efficient, lacking any trace of emotion, just like my father. Effective immediately, all shares belonging to Serafina Voss have been reassigned to Lucian Voss. Per board decision, her name has been removed from all company records. Any further inquiries should be directed to legal representation. The phone shakes in my grip. He erased me. Not just from his life, not just from the family, from the company, from the legacy I spent years building. Everything I had ever done, every sacrifice, every late night spent ensuring the numbers made sense, all of it wiped away with a single signature. My father didn't even have the decency to call. Anger ignites in my chest, burning away the last traces of hesitation. I grab my coat and keys. I'm going back. I push the doors to my father's office open without knocking. The force of it makes them slam against the walls, but Reginald barely looks up from his desk. I was expecting you! My heels click against the marble as I stride toward him, throwing my phone onto his desk. The email is still pulled up, the screen glowing in the dim room. Explain this! Reginald exhales, setting his pen down with a calm that makes my blood boil. You no longer have a role in this company. Lucienne is the future of Voss Industries. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh, shaking my head. Lucienne? The man who buried this company in debt? That's your future? Reginald's jaw tightens, but he doesn't flinch. This is how it should be. Something inside me snaps. All these years, I had convinced myself that if I worked hard enough, if I proved my worth, if I showed him that I was just as capable, maybe he'd see me. Maybe I'd matter. But I never stood a chance, did I? I take a step forward, my voice colder than I've ever heard it. You called me to fix Lucian's mess, and now you're throwing me away again? Reginald stands, stepping closer. His voice lowers, as if he thinks he can control me with his tone alone. You'll be fine, Serafina. You always are. And that's when it clicks. He never saw me as part of this family's legacy. I was just a tool, a disposable asset. I step back, exhaling slowly, forcing my hands to stay steady. You don't get to decide that anymore. Before he can respond, the door opens behind me. Victor Hargrove, the family lawyer, steps inside. The sight of him makes my stomach tighten. He's not here for casual conversation. He carries a folder in his hands, setting it down on the desk in front of me. "What is this?" I ask, though I already know I won't like the answer. Reginald gestures toward it, his expression unreadable. "A contract." I open it, scanning the pages quickly. The words blur together at first, but then the meaning slams into me. A legal agreement tying me to the company's debt restructuring. I snap my gaze up to Reginald. "If I sign this, I become financially responsible for Lucien's failures." Reginald doesn't blink. "This is business, Serafina, not personal." I let out a sharp breath. "Business?" I scoff, shoving the folder back toward Victor. "You're trying to ruin me." Victor clears his throat, adjusting his glasses. "If you refuse, the board will ensure the media sees you as the one who abandoned the company in its time of need. Your reputation will take the fall." I exhale slowly, nostrils flaring. So this is what it's come to. Blackmail. I pick up the contract. For a moment, I let them think I'm considering it. I let the silence stretch, let them believe they still hold control. Then, without breaking eye contact with my father, I rip it in half. Reginald doesn't even blink. "If that's your choice," he says smoothly, "don't come back." I meet his stare one last time, memorizing the indifference in his eyes. Then I turn and walk out, slamming the door behind me. As I step outside, my breath sharp against the cold air, I realize something. This time, I'm not coming back. But walking away doesn't erase the past. And it doesn't stop a war from beginning. I tell myself that slamming the door behind me was the end of it, that cutting ties with my father, my brother, and the company means I'm free. But I know better. Freedom doesn't come that easily. That evening, as I sit on my couch, staring at the city lights beyond my window, my phone vibrates against the coffee table. The sound is sharp in the quiet apartment, making my stomach twist. I reach for it, expecting another email, another demand, another threat. But when I see the name on the screen, I freeze. Alara Voss. My mother never calls. Not unless something is very, very wrong. I hesitate, thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me wants to let it go to voicemail, to pretend I never saw it, that she never reached out. But another part, the one still craving the mother I once thought she could be, presses accept. "Mom," I say, keeping my voice neutral. There's a shaky breath on the other end. "Sweetheart, please. I need you to come back." My chest tightens. There's nothing left to discuss. Alara exhales sharply, the sound heavy with exhaustion. "It's your father. He's furious, Serafina. He says if you won't help, he'll make sure you never work in this industry again." A cold sensation washes over me. Of course. Reginald isn't done yet. "Sweetheart, he's serious," she continues, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's already making calls. He says you'll regret this." There it is again. Regret. I close my eyes, inhaling slowly through my nose. "And what do I mean to him, Mom?" Silence. And that's my answer. I let the quiet stretch, let her sit in it. Because the truth is, she doesn't have one. "I can't do this," I say finally. "Not anymore, Serafina. But I've already ended the call." I stand by the window, watching headlights streak across the city below. My phone feels heavy in my hand, the weight of my past pressing down on me. I have spent years seeking validation from a man who will never give it to me. But I'm done being used. I unlock my phone, scrolling through my contacts, until I land on the name I need. Samantha Lee. Investigative journalist, sharp, ruthless, someone I've known since college, and someone I trust. I type a simple text. "I have a story. Meet me tomorrow." I hit send. For the first time in a long time, my hands are steady. The next morning, I sit across from Samantha at a small coffee shop tucked away in a quiet part of town. She leans back in her chair, stirring her espresso, eyes sharp as they study me. "This must be big," she says. "You never wanted to go public before." I slide a thick folder across the table. Inside, financial records, insider trading documents, evidence of Lucienne's embezzlement. Her eyebrows lift as she flips through the pages. She lets out a low whistle. "Jesus, Serafina, this is career-ending." I cross my arms. "That's the idea." Samantha glances up at me. "You know what this means, right? Once this goes out, there's no turning back." I nod. "I know." She studies me for a moment longer, then picks up her phone. "Then, let's burn it all down." By the afternoon, the first article is live. "The Fall of Voss Industries. Inside a Billionaire Family's Collapse." The internet explodes. Social media is flooded with speculation. Investors panic. Reporters swarm Voss HQ, shoving microphones into the faces of anyone with a badge. Reginald's name is splashed across headlines. His empire, the one he built on control and intimidation, is starting to crack. But I know better than to think this is over. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. Because men like Reginald Voss don't go down quietly. The media frenzy around the Voss family is only growing. News anchors dissect every detail, speculating about what will happen next. Financial analysts debate whether Voss Industries can survive the scandal. Comment sections are flooded with people either calling me a traitor or hailing me as a whistleblower. I expected backlash. I expected retaliation. But I didn't expect Lucian to call. My phone buzzes, his name flashing across the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I know him. He won't stop until I answer. I take a breath and swipe to accept. "You have 2 minutes." Lucian sighs dramatically. "Come on, Sarah. Is that how we're doing this now?" I stare out my window, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. "Why are you calling?" "Because you're ruining everything," he says, exasperated. "Why are you doing this?" I scoff. "Doing what? Telling the truth?" His voice shifts into something softer, something coaxing. "You don't have to do this. Come back. We can fix it together. You don't have to burn everything down." The words hit in a place I don't want to acknowledge, because for a split second, I feel the pull. The old instinct, the familiar urge to clean up his messes, to make things right. But then I remember, he wouldn't have done the same for me. "You still don't get it, do you?" My voice is quiet, but sharp as glass. "I'm not here to fix things. I'm here to watch them fall." I hang up before he can say anything else. For the first time, I don't feel guilty. That night, I'm curled up on my couch, scrolling through emails, when my phone pings with an alert. "Fraud warning. Unauthorized login attempt." I sit up instantly. Another notification pops up. "Flagged transaction. $500,000 transfer request. Pending." My stomach drops. I open my banking app, scanning the details. Someone tried to wire $500,000 from my account to an unknown offshore recipient. I feel my pulse hammering in my ears. There's only one person who would do this. I grab my phone and dial my bank's security hotline. The automated voice barely finishes the welcome message before I punch in my credentials, demanding to speak to a representative. The moment I'm connected, I don't wait for pleasantries. Someone just tried to access my account. I need it locked down immediately. The woman on the other end pulls up my profile. "Yes, Ms. Voss, I see the flagged transaction attempt. It was initiated from an encrypted IP address, but the system detected an irregularity and blocked it." My hands grip the phone tighter. "Do you have any details on where it came from?" A pause. Then, "The attempted login was traced to a device previously linked to Voss Industries." A sharp, bitter laugh escapes me. Of course. Reginald wasn't just trying to control my career. He was trying to financially ruin me. This isn't about business anymore. This is personal. I press my fingers to my temple, forcing myself to breathe. "Freeze all my accounts." No transactions without direct verification from me. Understood, Ms. Voss. We'll initiate the security measures immediately. I thank her and end the call, my body vibrating with anger. This is war. I pull up another contact on my phone. Ryan Caldwell, my attorney. The only person I trust to handle this. He picks up on the first ring. Sarah? My voice is steady, but fury simmers beneath the surface. File an injunction, freeze all of my accounts, and tell my father if he tries this again, I'll take him to court. Ryan exhales sharply. You're serious. I lean back, staring at the ceiling. I was serious when I walked away. He just didn't listen. Silence lingers for a second before he speaks again, his voice cautious. I'll take care of it. But Sarah, be careful. He's getting desperate. I hang up without responding. Because I already know. And desperate men are dangerous. Reginald had made his move. Now it was my turn. And this time, she wouldn't just defend herself. She'd destroy him first. The morning light barely filters through my curtains when my phone starts buzzing. The vibration rattles against the nightstand, relentless. I groan, reaching for it, but as soon as my fingers wrap around the device, I see the sheer flood of notifications. News alerts, missed calls, emails from reporters. I sit up, pulse quickening as I tap on the first notification. Breaking news. Voss Industries on the brink of collapse. Investors pull out. I stare at the words, my mind blank for a moment. Then, slowly, a smirk tugs at the corner of my lips. It's happening. I scroll through the article. The details hit like gunfire. Major investors have cut ties. Stock prices have plummeted overnight. Reginald Voss has yet to release a statement. I click out of the article and move to the next. Then the next. Every major financial outlet is covering it. Every business analyst is dissecting it. Every talking head is calling it one of the most catastrophic corporate implosions in decades. The empire he built is burning. And for the first time, I feel nothing but vindication. My phone rings. Lucien. I consider ignoring it, but curiosity wins. I answer. The moment the call connects, his voice explodes through the speaker. What did you do? I tilt my head, voice calm. Good morning to you too? Don't play games with me, Sarah. The company, it's collapsing. The investors, they're gone. I hum thoughtfully. You don't say. Lucian's breathing is ragged, unhinged. I swear to God, if you had anything to do with this. I cut him off, my patience wearing thin. Oh, please, Lucian. This isn't because of me. This is because of you. Silence. I press on, my tone sharper now. I didn't gamble with the company's money. I didn't lie to investors. I didn't steal from our own people. You did. His voice cracks. This isn't just business, Serafina. This is our family. I tighten my grip on the phone. No, Lucian. You did that all on your own. A long pause. Then his voice drops, something raw in it. You really don't care anymore, do you? I exhale, the weight in my chest lifting. For the first time, I don't. No, Lucien, I don't. And I hang up. The city stretches before me as I step onto my balcony. The skyline glows, the world still moving as if nothing monumental is happening. But it is. Voss Industries is crumbling, and for once, I'm not the one trying to hold it together. My phone buzzes again. A message from Ryan. It's done. The lawsuit is moving forward. If Reginald doesn't respond, the courts will seize his assets. I smirk, typing back a simple response. Let them. I set my phone down, inhaling the crisp morning air. Reginald Voss had spent his life controlling others. But now, he was losing control of everything. And the worst part? He had no one to blame but himself. The collapse of Voss Industries spreads like wildfire. Every major news outlet dissects the downfall, breaking down every reckless investment, every fraudulent transaction, every moment of incompetence that led to this disaster. It's all out in the open now. The investors who once groveled at Reginald's feet are scrambling to distance themselves. Former employees, once too afraid to speak, are now coming forward with stories of toxic leadership and corruption. Reginald's pristine, untouchable reputation, the legacy he spent decades cultivating, is turning to dust before his eyes. I watch from a distance, waiting, because I know this isn't over yet. And then it happens. A new article drops. I skim the headline, my heart skipping a beat. Exclusive. Insider exposes Reginald Voss's secret offshore accounts. I blink, scanning the article. The details are damning. This isn't just about mismanagement anymore. This is about fraud. And the only way this information could have gotten out? Someone close to him flipped. I don't have to wonder who it is for long. By noon, a face appears across every news broadcast, sitting stiffly in a chair across from an eager journalist. Ethan Whitmore, Reginald's most trusted right-hand man. The CFO of Voss Industries. The man who once stood beside my father in every boardroom, who swore unwavering loyalty. Now, he's the one driving the knife in. I sit back, watching the screen as the interview plays out. Ethan's expression is tight, his fingers laced together as he speaks. I can't stay silent anymore. People need to know the truth. And then the truth spills out. Reginald knowingly falsified financial reports. He moved company funds into offshore accounts. He misled investors, covering up losses while lining his own pockets. And the receipts? Ethan has them. Emails, transactions, documents that can't be denied. The media erupts. The Voss collapse is no longer just a financial disaster. It's a criminal investigation. My phone rings. Ryan. I answer, my voice steady. I saw the news. His tone is sharper than usual. The government is launching an official investigation. I exhale slowly, gripping the edge of my desk. It's happening. Reginald isn't just losing his company. He's going to lose everything. Lucian has gone radio silent. No doubt, he's panicking, scrambling for some way out. But there is no way out. He tied himself to Reginald's sinking ship, and now he's drowning with it. My phone buzzes again. This time, it's my mother. I hesitate before answering. Her voice is small, uncertain. He's not handling this well. I close my eyes, jaw tightening. You mean he's finally facing the consequences? Ilara sighs, the sound fragile. They're going to arrest him, aren't they? I don't answer. I don't need to. For the first time in his life, Reginald Voss is no longer the hunter. He's the prey. And when powerful men start falling, they grasp at anything to stay afloat, even if it means dragging others down with them. I know that Reginald won't go quietly. Men like him don't simply lose. They claw, they manipulate, they twist the truth until they find a way to crawl back to the top. But not this time. I'm in my office, reviewing some reports, when my phone rings. Ryan. The moment I see his name, I know what he's about to say. I press accept, my voice steady. Tell me. It's done, he says without preamble. The federal courts have frozen all of Voss Industries' assets. I lean back in my chair, inhaling deeply. This is the final nail in the coffin. Reginald can no longer move money. No more bribes. No more legal loopholes. No more buying his way out of this. For the first time in his life, he is powerless. The call comes an hour later. I see the name flashing across my screen and let it ring. Once. Twice. Then, against my better judgment, I pick up. For a moment, there's nothing but static. Then, his voice. Serafina, it's different this time. Raw. I stay silent, waiting. Reginald exhales sharply. You've made your point. My stomach tightens, but I keep my tone even. I haven't made my point. The courts have. His voice hardens. Undo this. Call your lawyer. Tell them to stop. A sharp laugh escapes me, cold, detached. Did you call Lucien first? I ask, tilting my head. Or am I still your last resort? Silence. I grip the phone tighter, forcing myself to breathe through the moment. You did this to yourself, Dad, I say finally, my voice steady. You had a chance to fix it. You chose power over family. Now live with it. And then I hang up. I don't hesitate. I don't second guess. And for the first time, I don't feel anything at all. Ryan calls later that night. Serafina, I don't think this is over. I stiffen, sitting up straighter. What do you mean? His voice is careful, measured. Reginald has too much pride. Men like him don't go down quietly. I exhale slowly, staring out at the city lights beyond my window. I already know that. But this time, I'm ready. Reginald had just lost everything, and desperate men were the most dangerous kind. The question wasn't if he would retaliate, it was when. Reginald had lost everything, and men like him didn't take loss well. He would lash out, fight tooth and nail to regain control. I knew the storm was coming. I just didn't know from which direction. I had spent the evening reviewing financial reports when a knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I frowned. No one came unannounced. Cautiously, I set my laptop aside and moved toward the door. I hesitated before unlocking it, my pulse kicking up a notch. Then I opened it. And there, standing in the dim hallway, was my mother, Ilara Voss. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes swollen from crying. She clutched her coat tightly around her frame, like it was the only thing holding her together. I hadn't seen her in weeks, not since the fallout. I didn't move. What are you doing here? She exhaled shakily. I made a choice. I stepped aside. Without a word, she walked in. The air between us was thick, heavy with things left unsaid. She sat down on the edge of my couch, wringing her hands together. I stood across from her, arms folded. Go on, I said, keeping my tone neutral. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in her eyes. Fear. Your father, she began, voice barely above a whisper. He's losing his mind, Serafina. I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. That's not new. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. He's blaming you for everything. He keeps talking about making things right. A chill ran down my spine. Making things right usually means making someone else suffer, I said slowly. Ilara's hands trembled. He threatened me, Serafina. I froze. What? She wiped at her face, blinking rapidly. I told him he needed to stop, that he needed to take responsibility. He lost it. She took a shaky breath. He said if I wasn't with him, I was against him. I gritted my teeth, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. And? Ilara lifted her chin, her voice quiet but firm. I told him I was against him. I studied her, searching for the hesitation, the doubt. But there was none. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother standing up to him. You actually said that? My voice came out more disbelieving than I intended. She nodded. I did. I didn't know what to say. This woman, who had spent her entire life bending to my father's will, who had stood by silently while he erased me, was suddenly choosing differently. I'm leaving him, she whispered. A lump formed in my throat. She met my gaze, her expression raw but determined. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. I exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to my temple. I wasn't ready to forgive, but maybe, just maybe, I was ready to believe that she could change. For the first time, Ilara Voss had chosen her daughter over her husband. But some men don't accept defeat, and Reginald Voss wasn't done fighting yet. I knew my father well enough to understand that losing control wouldn't make him retreat. It would make him desperate. And desperate men. They were the most dangerous. That's why, when I saw a familiar figure standing outside my building late that night, I wasn't surprised. Lucien. His usually pristine suit was rumpled, his tie undone. His hair, always styled to perfection, was a mess. I sighed, debating whether to walk past him, but before I could decide, he stepped into my path. Syrah, he said, voice low. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. There's nothing left to say, Lucian. His jaw tightened. You don't get it. This isn't just about the company anymore. We moved to a nearby bench, away from the prying eyes of my building's security cameras. Lucien sat heavily, rubbing his face before exhaling sharply. "Dad's unraveling," he admitted. "He's talking about revenge, about making you pay." I didn't react. Of course he was. Lucien turned to me, eyes desperate. "You can still fix this. If you come back, if you say something to the media." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You want me to save you, again." He flinched, but didn't deny it. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but sharp. "I spent my whole life cleaning up your messes, making excuses for you. And where did that get me, Lucien?" Silence. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Dad won't stop. You know that, right?" I exhaled, standing. "Then let him try." And I walked away, leaving Lucien alone in the cold. That night, I took one last action. I pulled up Lucien's number, and I blocked it. No more late-night calls, no more guilt trips, no more pleas for help that only came when he needed saving. Then I scrolled through my phone, finding the last family photo I had ever kept. A picture from years ago, a lie disguised as a memory. I deleted it, and as I did, I felt something new. Relief. For the first time, Serafina Voss was truly done with her family. But being done didn't mean Reginald was finished with her. I should have known that cutting him out wouldn't be enough. Men like my father didn't simply disappear into the background when they lost. They fought back. They clawed for control. They made sure everyone around them suffered for their downfall. And I was his favorite target. I was sitting at a cafe, halfway through my second cup of coffee, when my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down, barely paying attention, until I saw the headline. Breaking. Voss Industries under federal investigation. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked the article, scanning through it rapidly. The SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the DOJ, Department of Justice, have officially launched a criminal investigation into Reginald Voss, citing financial fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. I sat back in my chair, exhaling sharply. It's happening. This wasn't just a scandal anymore. This was a crime. Hours later, I was at my office, going through reports, when my assistant knocked hesitantly on the door. "Ms. Voss, there's someone here to see you." I frowned, expecting a journalist or an investor looking for reassurance. But when I stepped outside, my stomach dropped. Reginald stood there. His suit was still perfectly tailored, his posture still upright. But there was something different about him. He looked older, more tired. But the fire in his eyes? That was still there. I folded my arms, keeping my face blank. "You're either incredibly bold or incredibly stupid to show up here." He stepped forward. "Undo this, Serafina." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Undo what?" "Your crimes?" His jaw tightened. "You think you've won?" His voice was low, dangerous. "I made you, Serafina. You're nothing without me." I took a step closer, refusing to back down. "Then watch me be something without you." Reginald's expression darkened. He stared at me for a long moment, as if memorizing my face, as if searching for the daughter he once controlled. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. And I knew. This wasn't over. That night, Ryan called. "Sierra, I need you to be careful." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "What now?" He hesitated before speaking. "Reginald still has friends in high places. He's desperate, and desperate men." I exhaled, finishing the sentence for him. "Are dangerous." "Yeah, I know. Because Reginald was down, but not out. And I wasn't naive enough to think he wouldn't try again. But what he did next, even she didn't see it coming. I was expecting retaliation, a last-ditch effort, some pathetic attempt to reclaim his throne. What I wasn't expecting was this." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A low, unfamiliar voice rasped through the speaker. "Stop pushing this, Miss Voss. You don't want to make more enemies." The word sent a chill down my spine. A threat, a real one. My grip on the phone tightened. Who is this? Silence. Then the line went dead. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. Reginald. Even now, even backed into a corner, he was still pulling strings. The next morning, I met Ryan at his office. He barely looked up from his desk as I walked in. You look like hell! I dropped into the chair across from him. I need everything tied up, now. That got his attention. He leaned forward, hands clasped. You're serious? I met his gaze without hesitation. I'm done, Ryan. I'm leaving this behind. For good. He studied me for a long moment before nodding. I'll make it happen. I exhaled, the weight of it settling over me. No more Voss Industries, no more Reginald, no more fighting for a place I never truly had. It was over. That night, I packed my bags. It didn't take long. Most of my past wasn't worth bringing with me. As I zipped up my suitcase, I pulled out my phone. One last thing to do. I typed out a message to Lucian. This is the last time I'll ever reach out. You made your choice. I made mine. I hovered over the send button for a moment, then pressed it. I didn't wait for a reply. I blocked his number. The last thread tying me to the past, severed. As the plane lifted off the runway, I exhaled. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. But what he did next, even she didn't see it coming. I thought I knew what to expect. Retaliation, backroom deals, maybe even an attempt to spin the media in his favor. But this was a different kind of attack. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. My instincts screamed at me to ignore it, but something in my gut told me otherwise. I pressed accept. For a second, there was nothing but silence. Then a low voice slithered through the speaker. Stop pushing this, Miss Voss. You don't want to make more enemies. My blood ran cold. This wasn't one of Reginald's usual legal threats. This wasn't him sending Lucienne to beg. This was different. A real threat. I gripped the phone tighter, steadying my breathing. Who is this? Silence. Then the line went dead. I pulled the phone away, staring at the screen. I already knew the answer. Reginald. Even now, backed into a corner, he was still pulling strings. The next morning, I walked into Ryan's office without knocking. He looked up, immediately reading the tension in my face. What happened? I dropped into the chair across from him, jaw tight. I need everything tied up, now. Ryan set his pen down. You're serious? I met his gaze. I'm done, Ryan. I'm leaving this behind, for good. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed, nodding. I'll make it happen. I leaned back, exhaling. The weight of it all settled in my chest. No more Voss Industries. No more Reginald. No more fighting for a place I was never meant to have. It was over. That night, I packed my bags. It didn't take long. Most of my past wasn't worth bringing with me. The apartment was eerily silent as I zipped my suitcase shut. One last thing to do. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over a familiar name. Lucienne. I typed the message. This is the last time I'll ever reach out. You made your choice. I made mine. I pressed send. I didn't wait for a reply. I blocked his number. The last thread tying me to the past, severed. As the plane lifted off the runway, I exhaled. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. For the first time, Serafina doesn't just walk away. She slams the door shut forever. I had spent years keeping my head down, taking the hits, letting people rewrite the narrative to suit their needs. But this time, I was done. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. A flood of missed calls, emails piling up, social media notifications exploding at a pace that made my stomach twist. I blinked at the bright screen, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as I scrolled through the endless alerts, until one headline made my breath catch. Exclusive, Serafina Voss, the woman who destroyed her own family. I sat up so fast my sheets tangled around my legs. I clicked on the article, scanning the words. Lies. All of it. That I had deliberately sabotaged Voss Industries. That I had turned against my own father in an act of revenge. That I had betrayed the family for personal gain. They painted me as the villain. The cold, ruthless daughter who had orchestrated her own family's collapse. And there was only one person who could have fed them this story. Reginald. His final move. Ryan's name flashed across my screen. I answered before it finished ringing. You need to issue a statement. Now his voice was sharp, urgent, but I wasn't panicking. Not anymore. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening around the phone. No, I said, my voice calm. I'm going to do something better. Ryan hesitated. What are you planning? I picked up my other phone and scrolled through my contacts until I landed on the name I needed. Samantha Lee. A journalist I trusted. Someone who had no loyalty to the Voss empire. Someone who had always been waiting for the full story. I pressed dial. She answered on the first ring. Sarah, she said cautiously. I was about to call you. I'm ready, I said, cutting straight to the point. I'll give you everything. The full story, on the record. No more hiding. A pause. Then, meet me at the station in an hour. An hour later, I sat in front of a camera. Live. No pre-recorded statements. No edited press releases. Just me, the truth, and the entire world watching. I laid everything bare. The financial fraud. The manipulation. The reality of what had happened to Voss Industries. I told the world exactly who Reginald Voss was. And at the end, I said the one thing that sealed his fate. My father is a liar. And now, the world knows it too. The fallout was immediate. The internet turned on Reginald. More former employees came forward with damaging evidence. Investors announced a full-scale lawsuit. And just like that, the empire he had built on deception came crashing down. And me? I felt nothing but relief. Reginald had played his last card. And he had lost. But Reginald Voss was never a man who accepted defeat quietly. I knew the moment I went public, he wouldn't just sit back and let it happen. He would retaliate. And he did. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, emails, social media notifications exploding by the second. I grabbed my phone, my stomach twisting as I read the first headline that caught my eye. Exclusive! Serafina Voss, the woman who destroyed her own family. My chest tightened. I clicked the article, scanning the words. Lies. Every single one of them. That I had deliberately sabotaged Voss Industries. That I had betrayed my family out of spite. That I was nothing more than a greedy, vengeful daughter who turned on her own blood. It was calculated. It was cruel. And it had Reginald written all over it. I exhaled sharply, gripping my phone. This was his final move. Ryan's name flashed on my screen. I answered immediately. You need to issue a statement. Now I didn't hesitate. Number, I'm going to do something better. Ryan was silent for a moment. Then, cautiously, What are you thinking? I picked up my other phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Samantha Lee. I pressed dial. She answered after the first ring. Sarah, she said, her voice careful. I was about to call you. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady. I'll give you everything, the full story, on the record, live. There was a pause, then, meet me at the station in an hour. An hour later, I sat in front of a camera. No scripts, no pre-approved edits, just me. And the truth. I laid it all out. The financial fraud, the manipulation, the truth about who Reginald Voss really was. I told the world everything, and when I reached the end, I sealed his fate with one final cutting statement. My father is a liar. And now the world knows it too. The fallout was instant. The internet turned on Reginald. Former employees came forward, sharing their own stories of deception and corruption. Investors announced a full-scale lawsuit. Everything Reginald had built, his empire, his influence, his legacy, collapsed. And me. I felt nothing but relief. Reginald had played his last card, and he had lost. But men like him never go down without a final act of desperation. I should have known. I should have expected it. But somehow, even after everything, Reginald still found a way to sink lower. I was sitting in my office, reviewing legal documents, when Ryan stormed in, his face pale. "You're not going to believe what he just did." I barely looked up. "What now?" He tossed a folder onto my desk. I flipped it open. My stomach twisted. Doctored financial statements, fake accusations, a lawsuit against me. I scanned the pages, my pulse pounding. Reginald was trying to frame me. He was trying to bury me under the same crimes he committed. Ryan's voice was urgent. "If this sticks, Sarah, you could lose everything." I exhaled sharply, my grip tightening around the papers. "Then let's make sure it doesn't." An hour later, I sat in a conference room with my legal team. We dissected every false claim, every fabricated piece of evidence. And then, we found it. A flaw. A document timestamp that didn't match. The evidence had been tampered with, sloppily. I picked up my phone and dialed Samantha Lee. "I have one more story for you." That evening, a new headline dropped. Exclusive. Reginald Voss' desperate attempt to frame his own daughter. The internet exploded. Investigators swooped in, examining every inch of Reginald's last-ditch effort to save himself. And just like that, his plan backfired. The courts dismissed his case immediately, and now, he was the one facing additional criminal charges. I watched the news as Reginald's world collapsed. A live broadcast flickered across the screen. A judge had issued a warrant for his arrest. My phone rang. I answered without looking at the caller ID. Alara's voice was trembling. "They're taking him in, Serafina." I inhaled deeply, my voice steady. Good. Reginald had spent his life controlling people, but now he was just another man in handcuffs. And for the first time, Serafina wasn't looking over her shoulder anymore. No more waiting for retaliation. No more expecting a counterattack. It was done. The trial of Reginald Voss was everywhere. News anchors dissected every legal argument. Courtroom sketches filled the screens, each one depicting a man who once commanded power, now reduced to nothing. Video clips showed him being led in by federal agents, hands cuffed, face grim. Legal analysts speculated about sentencing, decades in prison, a lifetime of deceit catching up with him all at once. I watched, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, just a quiet acceptance that this was always how it had to end. My phone buzzed. Lucien. I considered ignoring it, but against my better judgment, I picked up. His voice was hollow. "It's over, isn't it?" I exhaled. "Yeah, it is." A bitter chuckle. "I used to think we'd be invincible, that no matter what, we'd have the Voss name to protect us." I was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Maybe that was the problem. Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unspoken. Finally, Lucien sighed. "Goodbye, Sarah." I didn't say it back. Instead, I ended the call. And this time, I didn't feel guilty. A week later, I sat in my new office, a business I built myself, one with no ties to the Voss empire. Ryan knocked on my door. I looked up. "Yeah." He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "The sentencing came in." I nodded, not asking for details. Ryan watched me for a beat. "You really don't care?" I met his gaze. Then, for the first time in a long time, I smiled. A real one. Number I really don't. For the first time, Serafina was no longer running from the past, because it no longer had any power over her. And with that, she stepped forward into a future that was entirely her own. No chains, no lingering shadows, just her. I sorted through my mail, barely paying attention. Bills, business correspondence, a thank you note from a client. And then, a letter. I stopped. The handwriting was familiar. Alara. I hesitated before tearing open the envelope. Inside, the words were simple. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope, one day, we can find a way back to each other. I exhaled slowly. I expected to feel anger, resentment, but instead, there was only understanding. Some wounds never fully heal, but some, with time, just might. I stepped into the office of my new company, my consulting firm. No ties to the Voss name, no legacy I had to prove myself against, just hard work, dedication, and freedom. A knock at the door. I turned. My assistant smiled. "Your first client is here." I smoothed my blazer, feeling something I hadn't in years. Excitement, purpose, a life that was truly mine. I smiled. "Let's get to work." That evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The past was still there. It always would be. But it no longer defined me. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I stared at it for a moment. And then, I let it ring. Whoever it was, they belonged to the life I had left behind. I blocked the number and set the phone down. And for the first time, I chose peace. Serafina Voss had won, not through money, power, or revenge, but by reclaiming her own life. And nothing could take that away from her. For years, I fought for a place in a family that never truly saw me. I gave, I sacrificed, and in the end, I realized my worth was never theirs to define. Walking away wasn't losing, it was winning on my own terms. Because true power, it's not in money, not in legacy, it's in knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone take that away. If this story resonates with you, hit subscribe, because your worth isn't measured by what you leave behind, but by the life you choose to build. Hello! My name is Cassia, and for as long as I can remember, my family made sure I knew one thing. I didn't belong. It wasn't just the lies, the manipulation, or the favoritism. It was the way my father looked at me like I was a burden, the way my sister smiled every time she got away with something at my expense, the way my mother tried to protect me, but never enough to actually stop it. And then, one day, it all fell apart. My sister framed me. My father didn't hesitate. He threw me out like I was nothing. And as I walked away, she laughed, saying the words I'll never forget. "Good luck, loser." I had nothing. No home, no safety, no family to turn to. But what they didn't know was that in just a few days, everything would change. Because karma has a funny way of coming back around. What happens when the people who betrayed you finally get what they deserve? When the mother who once stayed silent decides to fight back. The house on Meadowbrook Lane had always looked inviting from the outside. A classic two-story, painted a soft shade of blue, with white shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn. It was the kind of place that neighbors admired, the kind that suggested warmth and love within its walls. But for me, it had never been a home. I stepped out of my car, gripping the handle of my suitcase a little too tightly. The weight of old memories settled on my shoulders the moment I looked up at the front door. I had spent years trying to convince myself that coming back wouldn't feel this way, that I had outgrown the unease that crawled up my spine every time I set foot on this porch. But it was always the same. I took a slow breath and stepped inside. The scent of lavender and polished wood filled the air, familiar but suffocating. My mother, Serafina, was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. She turned at the sound of the door, her expression brightening with relief. "Cassia, sweetheart, you're here." Her embrace was warm, the only true comfort I had ever known in this house. But before I could fully sink into it, I heard another voice, light, sing-song, and laced with just the right amount of false surprise. "Well, well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence." Ophelia. I turned to see her standing in the living room, perched on the armrest of the couch, like a queen surveying her kingdom. She had always been beautiful, effortlessly charming, the kind of woman who could make a room gravitate toward her without even trying. And she knew it. Still dressing like a corporate drone, I see, she mused, eyeing my navy blazer and pressed slacks with thinly veiled amusement. I ignored her, setting my suitcase down beside the stairs. Where's Dad? The question barely left my lips before his voice rang from the study. Cassia! Magnus Calloway emerged, his presence as imposing as ever. He was a tall man, built like he had been carved from stone, with sharp features that softened only for Ophelia. He barely looked at me before gesturing toward the dining table. Sit. We need to talk. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach, but I obeyed. I had spent a lifetime following his orders, after all. Ophelia trailed after us, a smirk dancing on her lips. She slid into the chair across from me, resting her chin on her hand like she was about to enjoy a performance. Then, with a perfectly executed pout, she said, Cassia broke my laptop. I blinked. What? My MacBook. She tilted her head. The one Dad bought me last month. I found it cracked this morning. I let out a sharp breath, trying to suppress the immediate surge of frustration. I didn't touch your laptop, Ophelia. But she was already turning to Magnus, her voice laced with practiced disappointment. She was in my room last night. Maybe she knocked it over and didn't notice. Magnus barely hesitated. His gaze locked onto me, cold and unreadable. Is that true? I felt the anger rise in my chest, the same anger I had swallowed down my entire life. No, it's not. I wasn't anywhere near her room. Serafina stepped forward, concern etched into her features. Magnus, you can't just assume. I don't assume. He cut her off sharply. I know when someone refuses to take responsibility for their actions. His eyes bore into mine, as if daring me to argue. You need to be more careful, Cassia. If you can't respect other people's property, you'll have to face the consequences. I clenched my fists beneath the table. And what consequences are those? He leaned back, folding his arms. No more access to the family accounts. You're on your own financially. I stared at him, disbelief slamming into me. You can't be serious. Ophelia gave a tiny, satisfied shrug. Oh, I'm very serious, Magnus said. Maybe this will finally teach you some accountability. The injustice of it all made my pulse hammer in my ears. But I had been here before, fighting a battle that had already been decided before I even stepped onto the field. There was no point. I pushed back my chair and stood. Fine. Without another word, I turned and walked out. I didn't stop until I reached the backyard, the crisp evening air cooling my heated skin. I took slow, measured breaths, trying to force my emotions back into place. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from my assistant at work. Instead, it was my boss. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Cassia. His voice was sharp. I just got out of a meeting with the partners. The email with the quarterly reports never went out. A cold dread settled in my stomach. That's not possible. I sent it last night. No, you didn't. His voice was edged with disappointment. You're up for a promotion, Cassia. This kind of mistake doesn't reflect well on you. I stopped, realization crashing over me. Ophelia. I had asked her to forward the email while I was on a client call. She had smiled and said she would, and now I closed my eyes. Look, my boss sighed. I'll try to smooth things over, but don't let this happen again. The call ended. I stood there, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. She had done it on purpose, and she wasn't done yet. That evening, my colleagues came over for a small gathering, something I had planned for weeks. It was meant to be a chance to connect outside of work, a way to solidify my relationships with the partners before they made their decision about my promotion. But the moment we sat down, Magnus took the opportunity to humiliate me. She's always been a little scatterbrained, he said, smirking as he swirled the whiskey in his glass. Bright, sure, but never quite as sharp as she thinks. Ophelia laughed lightly, eyes glinting with amusement. I felt my throat tighten. My colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. I wanted to argue, to stand up for myself, but the words felt stuck. This was how it always went. I had spent my life fighting for respect in this house, but no matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, they would never see me as anything but the girl who was never quite good enough. I excused myself early, my appetite long gone. Lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the realization finally sank in. Nothing would ever change. Maybe it was time to finally walk away. I didn't expect my world to collapse overnight, but then again, I should have seen it coming. The morning sun filtered through my blinds, casting streaks of light across my room. My body felt heavy, drained from the humiliation of last night. I had barely slept, replaying my father's words, Ophelia's smirk, the quiet looks of pity from my colleagues. I had spent my whole life trying to prove I was worth more than the way they treated me. But no matter how hard I fought, they never saw me as anything more than an afterthought. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, my heart clenching at the sight of my boss's name flashing on the screen. A voicemail. I sat up, took a deep breath, and played it. Cassia, look, I hate to do this over the phone, but the partners made their decision. Given the email issue and the missed deadline, they've decided to go with someone else for the promotion. It's nothing personal. You're still a valuable member of the team, but we need someone who can be more reliable under pressure. I barely heard the rest. My mind was already spiraling. The promotion was gone. The thing I had worked for, sacrificed sleep for, bled my energy into, ripped away, all because of one missed email. An email that I had asked Ophelia to send. I gritted my teeth, shoving the blankets aside and storming out of my room. Ophelia was in the kitchen, sipping coffee like she hadn't just sabotaged me. She glanced up lazily as I approached, her lips curling in amusement. You knew, I said, voice low and shaking. She blinked, feigning innocence. Knew what? I slammed my phone onto the counter. That email, the one I told you to forward, you didn't send it. She tilted her head, tapping a manicured nail against the rim of her mug. Oh, that. Oops. Oops. My hands curled into fists at my sides. That mistake just cost me my promotion. She sighed, setting her mug down. Cassia, you really need to stop blaming other people for your failures. It's getting old. A sharp laugh escaped me, bitter and incredulous. You think this is funny? Before she could respond, my father's voice cut through the room. What's going on in here? I turned to see Magnus standing in the doorway, his expression already set in irritation. Cassia's throwing one of her tantrums again, Ophelia said smoothly, leaning against the counter. I turned to him, swallowing down my rage. Dad, I lost my promotion because Ophelia deliberately didn't send an email I asked her to. Magnus frowned, crossing his arms. And you're sure it's her fault? Yes! She admitted it! He let out a sigh, shaking his head. Cassia, you can't keep blaming Ophelia every time something doesn't go your way. Maybe, just maybe, you're not as capable as you think you are. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Ophelia smiled sweetly behind him, her eyes gleaming with victory. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to shake him and make him see the truth. But I knew better. Arguing with Magnus was like screaming into a void. So I turned, grabbed my phone, and walked away. That afternoon, I watched from the corner of the living room as Magnus presented Ophelia with a brand new designer handbag. A little reward for all your hard work in school, he said, ruffling her hair like she was 12 instead of a grown woman. I clenched my jaw. Hard work? She hadn't worked a day in her life. Ophelia accepted the gift with a glowing smile, casting a sideways glance at me. She was loving this, every second of it. Serafina stood near the kitchen, arms crossed, her mouth set in a tight line. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw the silent apology there, but she said nothing. She never did. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. You really don't see it, do you? Magnus turned to me, his expression cooling. See what? This. I gestured toward Ophelia, toward the expensive gift in her hands. The way you treat us differently. She does nothing and gets rewarded. I work my ass off and I get nothing but criticism. Magnus scoffed. You wouldn't understand, Cassia. Ophelia actually works hard. I barked out a humorless laugh. Right, of course. She works so hard manipulating you. His face darkened. That's enough. Ophelia smirked behind him, lifting her new handbag in my direction like a trophy. I turned away before I did something I'd regret. That evening, Magnus stormed into the house, his face red with fury. Who scratched my car? I looked up from my book, confused. What? The side mirror is broken. There's a huge scratch on the passenger side. Someone did this, and they're going to pay for it. Ophelia, lounging on the couch with her phone, didn't even look up as she said, I saw Cassia near the car earlier. Maybe she backed into something? I shot up from my seat. Are you kidding me? I wasn't even near your damn car, Ophelia. Magnus turned to me, eyes narrowing. Is that true? I let out a sharp breath, my frustration boiling over. Yes, I had nothing to do with it. Serafina finally spoke up, stepping forward. Magnus, we don't even know if Cassia was near the car. Don't defend her, Serafina, he snapped. She needs to take responsibility for once in her life. I felt like I was suffocating. No matter what I said, no matter what I did, I was always the villain in his eyes. And then, the final blow. You're paying for the repairs, Magnus declared, out of your own savings. I stared at him, my vision blurring with disbelief. You can't be serious. But he was. He always was. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my half-packed suitcase. I should leave. I should just walk out that door and never look back. I had the means to do it. I had a good job, my own money. The only thing holding me here was the idea that someday things might change. That if I worked hard enough, proved myself enough, maybe, just maybe, he would finally see me. But tonight, I realized something I should have known a long time ago. It didn't matter. Serafina came in, hesitating in the doorway. Cassia, I'm trying. I really am. But your father, he won't listen to me. I looked at her, really looked at her. The sadness in her eyes, the quiet resignation. She had given up, and I couldn't be like her. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the handle of my suitcase. I need to leave before they take even more from me. Serafina didn't argue. She just nodded, and that was all the confirmation I needed. I should have left that night. If I had, I wouldn't have been there when everything finally collapsed. I woke up to the sound of my father's shouting, and this time, I knew it was about me. The walls of the house seemed to shake with his fury, his deep voice cutting through the morning stillness like a blade. I sat up abruptly, my pulse already racing. The argument downstairs was familiar. Too familiar. But this time, there was something sharper, something final in his tone. I swung my legs over the bed and hurried to the doorway. The moment I reached the top of the stairs, I saw them. Magnus stood in the middle of the living room, his face red with rage. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, and his jaw was so tight I thought he might break his teeth. Serafina stood a few feet away, worry etched deep into her features. And then there was Ophelia, standing just behind him, her arms crossed, her expression an eerie mixture of concern and satisfaction. She stole it! Magnus's voice thundered through the house. My watch! My Rolex is gone! My stomach dropped. I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew where this was going. I told you. Ophelia's voice was soft, measured. She reached out, lightly touching Magnus's arm like she was trying to calm him. I saw Cassia near your office last night. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now... She let the words trail off, letting the implication sink in. My father turned toward me, his fury snapping to a new target. You! I felt the weight of his gaze like a physical force. You think I'd steal from you? I asked, my voice steady, though my hands had started shaking. Don't play innocent. Magnus's eyes burned with accusation. That watch was in my office yesterday. This morning it's gone. And now Ophelia tells me she saw you lurking around. I laughed bitterly. Lurking? Are you serious? Ophelia gave me a small, pitiful shrug. I didn't want to believe it either, Cassia, but it just makes sense, doesn't it? Magnus took a step closer, his fists tightening. Tell me where it is. I don't have it. My voice rose, my breath coming faster. I never touched your damn watch, Dad. This is just another one of Ophelia's games, and you're falling for it like you always do. Serafina stepped in then, placing a hand on Magnus's arm. Magnus, please, let's not do this. But he shook her off, his face darkening. Number? No more excuses. I've let this go on long enough. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You have been nothing but a problem since the day you were born. I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me? By stealing from me? I felt my chest tighten, a lifetime of his disappointments crashing down on me all at once. I didn't steal anything, I said, quieter this time, the fight draining out of me. But it didn't matter. It never mattered. Magnus's lips curled into a sneer. I have had enough of you. The words hit harder than any slap. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm. His grip was firm, bruising, and for the first time in my life, I saw something raw in his eyes. Something I had spent my whole life trying to pretend wasn't there. He hated me. Not disappointment, not frustration, actual hatred. You're done here, he said, his voice low and final. Ophelia, standing just behind him, watched with amusement. She had won, and she knew it. I yanked my arm free. You're making a mistake. Magnus didn't blink. Number. The mistake was keeping you in this house for so long. He turned and stormed toward the front door, throwing it open so hard it slammed against the wall. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Get out! Serafina gasped. Magnus, no! I said get out! The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Serafina, waiting for her to say something, to stop this, to fight for me. But she just stood there, her face pale, her eyes filled with an apology she wouldn't say out loud. She wasn't going to stop him. She wasn't going to save me. Slowly, I turned toward Ophelia. She met my gaze, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. Good luck, loser, she mouthed. I felt my entire body go numb. I wanted to scream, to cry, to fight. But I did none of those things. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take anything but my phone, my wallet, and the clothes on my back. And I didn't look back. I stepped out onto the porch, the cool morning air hitting my face like a slap. The world outside felt different. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own. And I had no idea where to go next. The first night alone was colder than I ever imagined. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself as I walked, the sharp evening air cutting through the thin fabric. I had no destination, no plan, just a backpack slung over my shoulder, and a phone that was barely holding on to its last bit of life. The streets of Houston were quieter than usual, the occasional headlights flashing past me as I wandered aimlessly. I pulled out my phone, my fingers stiff from the chill, and checked the screen. 1% battery. No missed calls, no texts, not even from Mom. I swallowed down the lump rising in my throat. Part of me had hoped, just a little, that she would reach out, that she would fight for me. But hours had passed, and silence had been my only answer. I glanced at the $20 bills in my wallet. $40. That was all I had. A motel was out of the question. If I wanted to make it through more than one night, I had to be smart about what I spent. I stuffed my phone and wallet back into my jacket and kept walking. The first place that seemed even remotely welcoming was a small 24-hour diner on the corner of Main Street. The fluorescent open sign buzzed softly above the door, and the windows were fogged with warmth. I hesitated before stepping inside. The place was nearly empty, just an old man nursing a cup of coffee at the counter, and a couple whispering in the farthest booth. The air smelled like burnt toast and stale grease, but at least it was warm. Sliding into a booth near the entrance, I dug into my pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills. I had to be careful. A waitress walked up, her expression polite but tired. "What can I get you, hun?" "Just a coffee," I said, handing her a 5. "Black?" She raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything, just nodded and walked away. I sat there, my fingers curled around the chipped tabletop, staring at nothing in particular. I just need somewhere warm for a little while. That was the plan. Just sit, gather my thoughts, and figure out what the hell I was going to do next. But then I heard it. A whisper, not meant for me, but unmistakably about me. "She's just sitting there, hasn't ordered food. You think she's—" Another voice, lower this time. "Let's wait a few more minutes. If she's not ordering, I'll ask her to leave." The waitress and her manager. I swallowed the shame rising in my chest. My coffee hadn't even arrived yet, and I was already being treated like a problem. I didn't wait. Before they could say anything else, I stood up and walked out, the warmth of the diner disappearing as quickly as it had come. I ended up at a bus stop, not because I had anywhere to go, but because it had a bench. I sat down, hugging my arms around myself, trying to ignore how exposed I felt. This is what it feels like to have nothing. The street was mostly empty, the occasional car passing by, but I could still hear the distant sound of laughter from somewhere down the block. A group of teenagers walked by, their voices carrying in the still night air. One of them whistled. I shifted uncomfortably, pulling my jacket tighter. Don't look at them, don't react. They kept walking, but my heart pounded harder than it should have. I had never felt this vulnerable in my life. For the first time since I had walked out of that house, true fear settled in. I couldn't stay here. I needed to find somewhere else, but I had nowhere left to go. And then, my phone buzzed. I jolted, yanking it out of my pocket so fast I almost dropped it. The screen flickered, battery clinging to life just long enough for me to see the message. "Mom. Cassia, where are you? Come home." "Please." My breath caught. She had reached out. I stared at the words, my emotions a tangled mess of relief, anger, and exhaustion. I wanted to ignore it, to keep moving forward, to prove to myself that I didn't need any of them, but I wasn't sure I had the strength to. Before I could decide, the screen went black. My phone had died. I exhaled sharply, pressing my palms into my eyes. I guess I have no choice now. I took a deep breath, turned around, and started walking toward the bus station. I didn't know what to expect when I walked through that door, but I knew things would never be the same again. The house loomed before me, its familiar shape casting long shadows under the dim porch light. My breath fogged in the cold air as I hesitated, fingers tightening around the strap of my backpack. I had walked away from this place with no intention of ever coming back. Yet here I was, drawn by a single message from the only person in that house who had ever truly cared. Before I could lift my hand to knock, the door swung open. Serafina stood there, her eyes wide with relief and something else, something that looked like shame. She looked tired, her hair hastily tied back, dark circles underlining her usually warm gaze. "Come inside, Cassia. Please." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. I hesitated for only a second before stepping past her into the entryway. The familiar scent of the house filled my lungs, lavender and old wood polish, but something felt different. It was too quiet. No distant sounds of the television blaring from the living room. No laughter from Ophelia. No commanding voice from Magnus filling the space with authority. Just silence. I swallowed hard. Something was wrong. Serafina led me to the kitchen, motioning for me to sit at the table. The last time I had sat here, I was a child, crying over a scraped knee. Back then, my mother had placed a bandage on my leg, kissed my forehead, and promised me everything would be okay. I wasn't a child anymore, and she couldn't promise me that now. She placed a steaming mug of tea in front of me, sitting down across the table. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them together. "I should have done something," she said after a moment, her voice thick. "I should have stopped him." I stared at her, emotions warring inside me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she had fought for me. But had she? Or had she just stood there, watching as Magnus threw me out? "You let it happen," I said quietly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Serafina's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I tried, Cassia. I begged him to reconsider, but he refused to listen." She shook her head, exhaling shakily. "He's too proud, too blind to see what Ophelia's doing to you." I studied her face, searching for any sign that this time would be different. "Are you finally ready to stand up to him?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. And that second told me everything. A noise from the hallway made me stiffen. Footsteps. I turned as Magnus stepped into the kitchen, his presence immediately filling the space. He was composed, arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. Ophelia followed closely behind him, her movements as effortless as ever. She leaned against the doorway, arms folded, her lips curled into an almost smile. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon," she mused. My fingers curled into fists beneath the table. "I bet you didn't." Magnus's gaze swept over me, impassive. His voice was flat when he spoke. "If you've come back expecting an apology, you won't get one." The words shouldn't have surprised me, but they still felt like a slap. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I didn't come back for you," Magnus scoffed, shaking his head. "Then why are you here?" The air in the kitchen crackled with tension. I could feel the weight of Ophelia's smirk, the smug victory still dancing in her eyes. She thought she had won. Maybe, in a way, she had. I swallowed hard, refusing to let them see me break. "I came back because Mom asked me to." Magnus exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Serafina, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't have brought her back." Serafina didn't move. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, placing herself between me and Magnus. "No, Magnus." Her voice was steady, stronger than I had ever heard it. "She is my daughter, and she is staying here." The room went completely still. Magnus blinked, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. Ophelia's smirk faltered slightly, her confidence shaken by the sudden shift in dynamics. For the first time in years, my mother was standing up for me. I wanted to believe it would last, but I knew this wasn't over yet. The battle lines had been drawn, and Magnus didn't like to lose. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with something unspoken, yet undeniable. Magnus took a slow step forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over my mother. His expression was dark, eyes narrowed with barely contained fury. "You don't get to make decisions in this house, Serafina," he said, his voice dangerously low. Serafina didn't flinch. She held her ground, her back straight, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. I had never seen her like this before, never seen her fight back. "This is my house, Magnus," she said firmly, "and I say Cassia stays." A silence settled over the room, thick and suffocating. I held my breath, waiting for the explosion. Magnus's hands curled into fists at his sides, his jaw twitching. He had always ruled this house with an iron grip, always had the final say. He wasn't used to being challenged. I could see it in his eyes, the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Ophelia was the first to break the silence. "Dad, maybe we should just talk about this." Her voice was smooth, carefully measured. "Cassia's obviously upset." I turned to look at her, feeling the anger rise in my chest. Of course, she was playing the peacemaker now, pretending to be the reasonable one. But I knew better. This was just another one of her games. Serafina, however, wasn't fooled anymore. "You've done enough, Ophelia," she said, her voice sharp. "You and your father have controlled this family for too long." Ophelia's expression faltered for the briefest second. just a flicker of something behind her eyes, something that looked an awful lot like fear. "This isn't over, Mom," she whispered. I watched the mask slip just for a moment. For the first time, Ophelia wasn't in control, and she knew it. Then Magnus slammed his hand against the kitchen table. The sound was like a gunshot, shattering the tense silence. I flinched, my breath catching in my throat. "You don't get to tell me how to run my house!" he bellowed, his face red with fury. I felt my pulse spike, adrenaline rushing through my veins. Then his gaze snapped to me, his expression shifting into something darker. "You want to stay?" His voice was low, almost a growl. "Fine, but you follow my rules. One step out of line, and you'll be gone for good." The threat hung in the air between us, suffocating and real. Serafina moved before I could react, stepping between us like a shield. "No, Magnus," she said, her voice steady. "You don't control her anymore." Magnus's nostrils flared, his eyes wild, but something had shifted. For the first time, he wasn't the one calling the shots. I swallowed, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. This was it. The moment everything truly changed. I took a step forward, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You're right, Dad," I said, each word slow and deliberate. "This is your house." His expression flickered with something unreadable. "But it's not my home." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Magnus's face hardened, but he didn't speak. I turned to my mother. "Mom, if you really mean what you said, then prove it." Serafina's breath hitched. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. Then, slowly, she turned back to Magnus. She met his eyes, her voice calm but unwavering. "I will." The next morning, Mom made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of her, untouched. Her phone was still in her hand, her fingers hovering just above the screen, as if she were considering undoing whatever she had just done. I hesitated before stepping closer. "Mom?" She looked up at me, her face unreadable. Then, with a breath that seemed to release years of held tension, she said, "I made the call. I have an appointment this afternoon." I stared at her, the words taking a second to sink in. "You're serious?" A small, humorless laugh escaped her. "I should have done this years ago." I sat down across from her, searching her face for any hesitation, any sign that she was wavering. There was fear in her eyes, but underneath it, something stronger. Resolve. Magnus had no idea what was coming. The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. Mom kept busy, cleaning, organizing drawers, folding clothes that didn't need folding. I could see it in the way she moved, the restless energy of someone standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for the right moment to jump. I didn't say much. What was there to say? Ophelia, however, was watching. She always did. By noon, she finally spoke. "Mom, is something going on?" Serafina barely glanced up from wiping the already clean countertop. "It's nothing you need to worry about." But I saw the way Ophelia's eyes narrowed. She didn't like being kept out of the loop. "Really?" she pressed, her voice laced with suspicion. "Because you've been acting off." Serafina met her gaze, calm and unreadable. "I'm just tired, Ophelia, that's all." For once, Ophelia didn't seem convinced. She lingered in the doorway a second longer before walking away, but I caught the flicker of something behind her carefully constructed mask. Paranoia. She felt it. The shift. And for the first time, she had no idea what was coming next. That evening, the door swung open, and Magnus walked in. I was in the living room when I heard it, the slight pause in his footsteps as he crossed the threshold. He knew. Something was wrong. He set his briefcase down with a little too much force. "What's going on?" Serafina stepped into the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She didn't hesitate. "I've spoken to a lawyer, Magnus. I'm filing for divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a rubber band snapping, the tension in the room broke. "You're what?" His voice was sharp, disbelieving. Serafina didn't flinch. "I'm leaving you." I held my breath, waiting for the explosion. It came like a storm, sudden and violent. Magnus's face turned red, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "You think you can just throw me away like garbage?" Serafina met his fury with quiet defiance. "This isn't up for debate." I had never seen her like this. Not once. Magnus took a step forward, his body tense. I moved instinctively, standing between them before I even realized what I was doing. He looked at me, eyes filled with something dangerous. "You think you're strong enough to take me on, Cassia?" His voice was low, menacing, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking through me, at her, at Serafina, and she didn't waver. "You'll regret this," he muttered, voice laced with quiet fury. His gaze flickered between the both of us, as if memorizing the moment. Then, he turned sharply on his heel and stormed up the stairs. The echo of his footsteps rang through the house. Ophelia stood in the hallway, watching with wide, calculating eyes. The war had begun. We didn't know it yet, but Magnus wasn't going to leave quietly. The air in the living room was thick with tension. Magnus stood in the center, pacing like a caged animal, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with barely contained rage. Serafina stood firm, her arms crossed, her posture unnervingly calm. The storm was brewing right in front of her, yet she didn't flinch. "You don't get to do this," Magnus growled, his voice low and dangerous. Serafina met his glare without hesitation. "I already did." The words were like a slap. I saw the flicker of disbelief in Magnus's eyes, the way his breath hitched just slightly. He was losing control, and he knew it. I had spent my entire life watching my mother yield to him, watching her shrink herself down to avoid his anger. But tonight, something was different. She wasn't afraid anymore, and Magnus didn't know what to do with that. Ophelia stormed into the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her eyes darted between our parents, her breath shallow. "Mom, you can't do this!" she hissed. Then she turned to Magnus, her voice sharpening. "Dad, do something!" For the first time in my life, I saw my father speechless. Ophelia's face twisted in frustration. She whirled on me, her gaze full of venom. "This is your fault." Her voice wavered, but she tried to mask it with fury. "You poisoned her against us." I didn't respond. I just watched. Because that's when I saw it, the mask slipping. Ophelia wasn't just angry, she was terrified. She wasn't fighting for Magnus. She was fighting for herself, for the cushioned life she had built under his protection. If he lost, she lost too. And that scared her more than anything. Magnus slammed his fist against the table. The force of it made the whole room jump. "I built this house," he snarled. "I paid for everything, and you think you can just erase me?" His voice shook the walls, but Serafina didn't move. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as he turned toward her, stepping closer. His hands were still shaking, his breathing uneven. I saw something in his eyes then. Something dark. Something dangerous. Serafina must have seen it too, because she took a slow step back, her expression unchanging. Then she spoke, voice steady as steel. "Touch me, and I'll have you arrested." The words cut through the room like a blade. Magnus froze. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his fingers twitching at his sides. He had spent his whole life wielding power over this house, over her. And now, in this moment, he had none. The realization settled into his expression, twisting his rage into something uglier. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Both of you." Then, he turned to Ophelia. "Come on," he ordered. "We're leaving." Ophelia's face paled. She glanced between him and Serafina, hesitating. And then, for the first time, I saw real doubt in her eyes. She didn't move. Magnus let out a sharp breath, disgust flashing across his face. He turned and grabbed his coat, heading for the door without looking back. He walked out alone. The front door slammed behind him, rattling the walls. And as the silence settled over the house, I knew one thing for sure. He'd be back. And when he returned, he wouldn't be coming to talk. The house felt eerily quiet the next morning. No heavy footsteps echoing down the hall, no sharp commands from the kitchen, no tension humming beneath every conversation. For the first time in years, Magnus was gone. And yet, instead of relief, all I felt was unease. I could see it in my mother, too. Serafina moved around the house as if nothing had happened, tidying up, folding laundry, wiping down counters that were already clean. But her movements were too precise, too methodical, like she was trying to convince herself that this was normal. It wasn't. I sat at the kitchen table, watching her in silence. She wasn't ready to admit it, but I knew the truth. This wasn't over. That afternoon, the first blow came. A knock at the door. Not loud, not aggressive, just a single deliberate rap against the wood. Serafina's hands tensed around the dish towel she had been wringing. I stood up instinctively, something cold settling in my stomach. She walked to the door, hesitated for only a second, and pulled it open. A man in a suit stood on the porch, a folder in his hand. "Mrs. Calloway?" he asked. Serafina straightened. "Yes." He handed her the envelope. "You've been served." I heard the sharp inhale of her breath as she took it. The door closed behind her, and she walked back into the kitchen in silence. She set the envelope on the table and slowly opened it. Her face remained unreadable as she skimmed the pages, but I saw her hands tighten just slightly. Then she exhaled. "He's contesting the divorce." I swallowed hard. "What else?" "He wants the house," she said simply. I felt my stomach drop. "He's trying to ruin you." She nodded, but when she finally looked at me, there was no fear in her eyes, only determination. "Then we fight." That night, another knock came. This one was hesitant, uncertain. I glanced at the clock, almost midnight. Frowning, I walked to my bedroom door and opened it. Ophelia stood there, arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, we just stared at each other. "Are you lost?" I asked dryly. She huffed, but didn't rise to the bait. "You have to talk to Mom." I raised an eyebrow. "I talk to Mom every day." Ophelia let out an impatient breath. "Dad is going to destroy us all if she goes through with this." I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms. "Since when do you care?" Ophelia's jaw clenched. "This isn't about me." I tilted my head, studying her. And then I saw it, the flicker of fear beneath her frustration. "This isn't about me, is it?" I said slowly. "You're just scared of losing everything." She flinched, but didn't deny it. I let out a humorless chuckle. "You really thought he'd protect you, didn't you?" Ophelia's eyes darkened. "You don't understand, Cassia. You've never understood." "Then explain it to me," I challenged. She opened her mouth, but no words came. She hesitated for a beat too long, then turned on her heel and walked away. I watched her retreat, the weight of realization pressing down on me. The cracks in her world were starting to show. And she knew it. The phone rang an hour later. Serafina was in the living room, sitting with a book in her lap, though I doubted she had read a single word. When the shrill sound pierced the silence, she didn't even flinch. She reached for the phone, checked the caller ID, and pressed the answer button. "Hello, Magnus," she said, her voice cool. I sat on the couch across from her, my pulse spiking. The voice on the other end was low and measured. "You think you can win this, Serafina?" Serafina's fingers tightened around the phone. "This isn't about winning, Magnus. This is about freedom." A slow, cruel laugh filtered through the speaker. "You'll never be free of me." My skin crawled at the certainty in his voice. Serafina held the phone to her ear for a moment longer. Then, without another word, she hung up. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. I met her gaze. "He's not going to stop," she nodded. "I know." I exhaled. What do we do now? She set the phone down, her face unreadable. We prepare. As Mom hung up, I knew this fight was far from over. We had underestimated him, and that was our first mistake. The next morning, the doorbell rang, its sharp chime slicing through the quiet house. I exchanged a glance with Mom before she stood, moving toward the door with careful steps. A man in a crisp suit stood on the porch, holding a thick envelope in his hands. He gave a polite nod before handing it over. "Mrs. Calloway, you've been served." Mom didn't react. No flinch, no hesitation. She took the papers and shut the door behind her. I watched as she walked to the kitchen table, her movements slow but deliberate. She unfolded the documents, her eyes scanning the words, her fingers tightening around the pages. Then, softly, she murmured, "He wants to leave us with nothing." I stepped closer. "What?" Mom exhaled, pressing her lips together before looking up at me. "He's contesting everything. He wants the house, the assets, full control of the finances." She turned another page, her expression unreadable. "He's claiming he supported this family financially, that I wouldn't have what I do without him." I felt the heat of anger rise in my chest. "That's a lie! You paid for everything. You carried this house while he—" "I know." Her voice was steady, but I saw the way her hands trembled just slightly. I clenched my fists. "Then we won't let him." Ophelia stormed into the kitchen an hour later, the papers clutched in her hand like a weapon. "Mom, you have to stop this!" she snapped, her voice shrill. "He's going to ruin us!" Mom didn't even glance at her. "He's the one doing this, not me." Ophelia's expression twisted, her breathing shallow. "You think this is just about you?" She waved the documents in frustration. "This affects all of us. If he takes the house, he won't." "But what if he does?" Ophelia's voice wavered. "Maybe if we just talk to him?" I let out a sharp laugh, cutting her off. "Talk to him? Since when has talking to him ever changed anything?" Ophelia shot me a glare, but this time there was something beneath it. Uncertainty. She was finally realizing she had bet on the wrong side. 2 days later, we sat in the courtroom, waiting for the first hearing to begin. The air was thick with tension, the cold sterility of the room doing nothing to settle my nerves. I sat beside Mom, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to appear composed. Then the doors opened. Magnus walked in, his suit crisp, his expression composed. A lawyer followed closely behind him, briefcase in hand, his movements precise and confident. Magnus's gaze swept over us, a slow smirk curling at the edges of his lips. He looked like a man who had already won. The hearing began. His lawyer was the first to speak, his voice smooth and practiced. "Your Honor, my client has provided for this household for years. His financial contributions ensured the stability of his family, and it is only fair that he be awarded the majority of shared assets, including the home." I felt my nails dig into my palm. Lies. Mom's lawyer didn't even blink before responding. "Your Honor, the plaintiff has not contributed financially for years. In fact, Mrs. Calloway was the sole provider of this household, paying the mortgage, utilities, and all household expenses. Any claims to financial contribution are unfounded." Magnus's smirk faltered. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression, something uncertain. For the first time, he wasn't in control. The hearing was brief, just the beginning of what would be a long battle. As we walked out of the courthouse, I could feel his presence behind us, his steps slow and deliberate. And then, just as we reached the exit, he leaned in close to Mom, his voice low. "You think you've won, Serafina," he murmured. "This is only the beginning." Mom didn't react, didn't even acknowledge him. She just kept walking, her back straight, her face unreadable. But I turned, just enough to meet his gaze. And I saw it. Beneath the anger, beneath the bravado, there was something else. Fear. I had spent my whole life fearing my father, but now, for the first time, I realized he was afraid of us, and that made him more dangerous than ever. At first, it was subtle, a flicker of the lights in the kitchen, the hum of electricity stuttering, just for a second. A power outage that lasted only a moment, long enough to make my mother pause, glancing up from her book. "Probably just the wiring," she murmured. But I wasn't so sure. Then the bank called. Mom stood at the counter, phone pressed to her ear, her grip tightening as she listened. "What do you mean my account was frozen?" Her voice was calm, but I could hear the undercurrent of unease. The conversation ended quickly, and when she turned to me, her face was unreadable. "Someone tried to put a hold on my accounts," she said. "The bank flagged it as fraud." I didn't have to ask who. And then the car appeared. A dark sedan parked just across the street. Not always there, not all night, but enough that I noticed. Enough that it sent a chill down my spine. I sat on the couch one evening, staring at it through the window. The engine was running. Someone was inside. But they never got out. "He's trying to scare us," I murmured. Mom stood behind me, arms crossed. "No," she exhaled. "He's trying to break us." Ophelia was quieter than usual. She moved through the house like a ghost. Her usual arrogance faded. I caught her watching Mom more than once, studying her like she was trying to read between the lines of something unspoken. One evening, she slid into the seat across from me at the dining table. "We should talk to Dad," she said suddenly. "Try to calm him down." I set my fork down, staring at her in disbelief. "Are you serious?" Ophelia didn't meet my eyes. "You're scared," I realized. "You think he's going to come after you next." She exhaled, rubbing her hands together, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. For the first time, I saw it. She wasn't just a manipulator, she was a product of him. And now, without his protection, she was just as lost as the rest of us. The pounding on the door woke me in an instant. I bolted upright, my heart hammering. It was nearly 2 a.m. Another loud bang echoed through the house. I threw off my blanket and rushed to my window, peering down. My stomach turned to ice. It was Magnus. Serafina was already in the hallway when I stepped out, her face pale but composed. "Don't open it," she whispered. The pounding continued. "You think you can take everything from me?" Magnus's voice boomed through the door, raw with fury. I pressed myself against the wall, my breath shallow. Then, bang! Glass shattered somewhere downstairs. Mom flinched, then grabbed her phone, dialing. "I'm calling the police!" Magnus laughed from outside, a dark, guttural sound. "You think they can protect you?" I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. This wasn't going to end with words. By the time the police arrived, Magnus was gone. They took our statements, glanced at the shattered window, and nodded solemnly as Mom filed for a restraining order. But we all knew it wouldn't stop him. Ophelia sat on the couch, staring at the shards of glass scattered across the floor, her face unreadable. For the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. I turned to my mother, my voice quiet but firm. "We have to end this. Before he does. Because if we didn't stop him now, we might not get another chance." And Magnus was about to prove exactly how far he was willing to go. The morning after the attack, the house felt different. Not just because of the shattered window or the cold breeze that snuck in through the temporary plastic covering. It was something else, something heavier. Mom stood in the living room, staring at the glass shards still scattered on the floor. She held the phone to her ear, speaking in hushed, clipped tones. I knew who she was talking to. Her lawyer. "We're moving forward with a restraining order," she said, her voice steady, "and I want to discuss the financial dispute." I watched her, noticing how stiff her posture was, how the exhaustion clung to her shoulders. She had always carried so much weight, but for the first time, I could see it wearing her down. "I should have done this years ago," she whispered as she hung up. I swallowed, nodding, but there was a pit in my stomach. "It won't stop him. He won't let us go that easily." She turned to me, her gaze unwavering. "Then we won't make it easy for him either." By noon, another letter arrived. I saw the official-looking envelope before Mom did. My stomach twisted as I picked it up from the mailbox, my fingers tightening around it. The return address was from Magnus's lawyer. Another attack. Mom took the envelope from me, her expression unreadable as she tore it open and unfolded the papers. Her eyes moved across the page, and then, just for a second, I saw it. The flicker of unease. "He's demanding financial compensation," she murmured. I frowned. "What?" "He's claiming he contributed to the home's finances and is entitled to half of everything." My blood boiled. "That's a lie." Mom exhaled through her nose, setting the papers down with deliberate calm. "Of course it is." I watched her closely, noticing how her hands trembled before she balled them into fists. "He's trying to bleed you dry," I said. She lifted her chin. "Let him try." But I knew the truth. This wasn't just about money. This battle wasn't going to end in court. It was about to get personal. Ophelia was pacing when I walked into the kitchen later that evening. The house had been quiet since the letter arrived, but she was anything but. Her arms were folded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mom," she started, hesitant. "Maybe we should settle. Maybe it's not worth it." I stiffened. Mom turned from the sink, giving Ophelia a sharp look. "Are you suggesting we let him win?" Ophelia's mouth opened, then closed. I exhaled slowly, watching her closely. "You're scared," I said. She flinched, but didn't deny it. "He's our father, Cassia." Her voice was quieter now, almost pleading. The air between us grew heavy. For so long, I had resented her, hated the way she always took his side, the way she always stood in his shadow. But now I saw it clearly. She wasn't just complicit, she was trapped, but that didn't mean I was going to save her, and I wasn't going to let her drag us down with her. "The lines have been drawn, Ophelia," I said finally. "Pick a side." She didn't answer. Maybe she already had. That night, the final warning came. I had been walking past the front door when something caught my eye. A thin white envelope barely sticking out from beneath the doorframe. I hesitated before reaching for it, dread curling in my gut as I pulled it inside. Inside, there was only a single sheet of paper. A note. "You can't hide behind the law forever. I always win." No signature, no threats spelled out. Just a message, a promise. I clenched my fists, my pulse pounding in my ears. I turned to Mom, handing her the letter. She read it, her expression unreadable, then set it down. She didn't look afraid. She looked furious. "It's time to end this," I said, voice steady. Once and for all. Magnus had declared war, and we were finally ready to fight back. The night before the final hearing, I had a feeling something bad was going to happen. I just didn't know how right I was. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Mom was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters for the third time that evening. She wasn't cleaning. She was keeping herself busy, distracting herself from the inevitable. "Tomorrow, it's over," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "One more day and we're free." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that the judge would see through Magnus's lies, that the restraining order would hold, that the law would finally be on our side. But something inside me wouldn't settle. Magnus wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. A soft creak, barely audible over the hum of the heater. I held my breath, straining to listen. Another sound, closer this time, the stairs. I grabbed my phone, heart hammering, and slid out of bed as quietly as possible. I crept toward my door, inching it open just enough to see the hallway. And then I saw it. A shadow moving through the living room. The front door was still locked. No windows were broken. He had a key. I clenched my jaw, swallowing down the rising panic. Serafina's door creaked open, and she stepped out, her expression turning to stone the moment she spotted him. "Get out," she said, her voice firm but shaking slightly. Magnus turned toward her, smiling like he had just walked in from work instead of breaking into the house in the middle of the night. You really thought a piece of paper could stop me? He took a slow step forward. You're ruining this family, Serafina. You always were weak. I moved before I could think, stepping between them. You lost this family the moment you chose yourself over all of us. I shot back, my voice steady. Something snapped in his eyes. He lunged. His hand clamped down on my arm, fingers digging into my skin. Pain shot through me, but I refused to let him see it. Then, crash! Mom swung a lamp into his shoulder, the sound of shattering glass piercing the air. Magnus stumbled back, his face contorted with shock. For the first time, he looked truly afraid. And then, before he could recover, sirens. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. I saw the moment he realized it was over. The front door burst open, and officers rushed in. They had barely pulled him away before he turned back, his eyes burning with hatred. You think this is over? He growled. Mom stepped forward, her chin lifted, her voice unwavering. Yes. I do. Magnus's jaw clenched, but this time he had no power left. The officers led him out, his footsteps heavy against the floor. And then, silence. I exhaled, my whole body trembling. I turned to Mom. For the first time, our house belonged to us. But the damage he left behind would take longer to fix. The next morning, we stood in court for the final time, this time without fear. The air inside the courthouse was sterile, the walls a dull shade of beige, but for the first time, I didn't feel suffocated by them. This place had been a battleground for months, a place where Magnus had tried to manipulate, control, and destroy us. But today, we weren't the ones on trial. I glanced at my mother. She sat beside me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There was no shaking, no hesitation, just quiet strength. Then, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Magnus was led inside, his hands cuffed in front of him. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven. The arrogance that had always radiated from him was gone, replaced with something else. Defeat. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court has reached its final decision. I held my breath. Full ownership of the property and financial assets is awarded to Serafina Calloway. Relief crashed over me like a wave. The divorce is officially granted, with no financial obligations to the defendant. Mom exhaled slowly. And given Mr. Calloway's repeated violations of the restraining order, combined with his recent acts of violence, this court is issuing a formal sentence, which will be carried out immediately. I looked at Magnus, expecting him to fight, to protest, to do what he always did, make himself the victim, but he just sat there, staring ahead. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp and cool. The weight I had carried for years had finally started to lift. I was about to head toward the car when I heard my name. Cassia, wait. I turned, already knowing who it was. Ophelia. She stood a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. I need to talk to you. I crossed my arms. Why? Ophelia swallowed, shifting her weight from foot to foot. I didn't know he'd go this far, she said quietly. I thought he was just trying to scare you. I let out a humorless laugh. You thought he was scaring us for fun? She winced. She hesitated. I don't want to lose my family. Something in me tensed, waiting for the anger, the resentment, the years of pain to surge forward. But I felt nothing. You already did. Ophelia's lips parted, but no words came. She knew it was true. For once in her life, she had to face the consequences. I turned away, walking toward the car without looking back. The house felt different when we stepped inside. Lighter. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. The same walls, the same furniture, the same space that had once felt like a cage. But now, for the first time, it felt like something else. Ours. Mom handed me a cup of coffee, sitting beside me on the couch. So, I murmured, staring at the quiet sunlit room. What now? She smiled, a small, tired, but real smile. Now, she said, we live. For the first time in my life, home wasn't a prison. It was exactly what it was supposed to be, ours. But even as we tried to move forward, the ghosts of the past weren't ready to let us go. The house was quiet. Too quiet. A week had passed since the court ruling, since Magnus had been taken away, since the war had officially ended. And yet, every time the floor creaked or the wind pushed against the windows, my body tensed, waiting for something that wasn't coming. Mom and I fell into a new routine: morning coffee in the kitchen, the absence of whispered arguments behind closed doors, the relief of knowing that no one was lurking just around the corner, waiting to strike. It should have been peaceful. It should have been freeing. But instead, it felt empty. Mom caught me flinching one evening when a car door slammed outside. She didn't say anything at first, just watched me with quiet understanding. It's going to take time, she finally murmured. I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure if time would ever be enough. The knock on the door came on a Thursday afternoon. I almost didn't answer it, but something in me knew. When I pulled the door open, Ophelia stood there. She looked different, not the perfectly polished, immaculately composed version of herself I had grown up with. She looked small, tired. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, she said, I don't have anywhere else to go. I exhaled, 1,000 responses flashing through my mind. And what do you expect me to do about that? And that's my problem. How? And you had a place. You chose to burn it down. But instead, all I said was, Why are you here, Ophelia? She swallowed hard, shifting on her feet. I don't know. I don't know who I am without him. Her voice cracked on the last word. Magnus. She wasn't here for redemption. She wasn't here to undo the past. She was here because, for the first time in her life, she had no one to hide behind. I didn't invite her in right away. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her like I had never really looked at her before. I'm not going to forget what you did, I said finally, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. She nodded, the weight of those words settling in. I don't deserve it anyway, she murmured. Silence stretched between us. Two sisters who were never really sisters. After a long pause, I pushed the door open just enough to let her step inside. Not because I trusted her, not because things would ever be okay between us, but because, for the first time, she wasn't pretending. Maybe this wasn't an ending. Maybe it was just the in-between. No matter how much we tried to outrun it, the past would always be a part of us. A month had passed since the courtroom, since Magnus had been taken away, since we had finally won. Life without him was different. There was space now, a quietness in the house that hadn't existed before. The air felt lighter, as if we had been holding our breath for years, and only now were allowed to exhale. Mom filled the silence in small ways. She repainted the kitchen, rearranged the furniture, started attending yoga classes at the community center. I watched as she slowly rediscovered herself, piece by piece, reclaiming the life that had always been hers. I threw myself into work, no longer carrying the weight of my father's judgment every time I stepped into my office. For the first time, my life was my own. But the scars remained. I still tensed when I heard an unexpected noise in the house. Mom still hesitated before answering an unknown number. Some nights, I lay awake, replaying his last words in my head. You think this is over? I knew better than to think trauma had an expiration date. One evening, as we sat on the porch, sipping tea, I finally voiced the thought that had been haunting me. It doesn't just go away, does it? Mom sighed, staring out at the dimming sky. No, she admitted, but it gets quieter. Ophelia had been staying with us for a few days, but we all knew it wasn't permanent. She didn't belong here anymore. I saw it in the way she hesitated before entering a room, the way she avoided real conversations, the way she glanced toward the front door as if debating whether to walk through it for good. One evening, she finally said it. "I think I'm going to leave town." I looked up from my book, raising an eyebrow. "Running away?" She shrugged. "Starting over." I searched her face, looking for something: remorse, regret, even the slightest hint of self-awareness. But there was nothing, just exhaustion. And for the first time in my life, I felt no anger toward her, no bitterness, just acceptance. "Do whatever you want, Ophelia," I said, closing my book. "But don't expect me to save you next time." She nodded, as if she already knew that. The next morning, she was gone. No goodbyes, no long explanations, just a quiet exit. And honestly, that was probably the way it was always meant to be. I stepped onto the porch that afternoon, looking at the house that had once felt like my prison. The walls were the same. The doors, the windows, the floors, they were all still there. But it felt different now. Lighter. Like maybe, just maybe, it could be something else. Mom joined me, coffee in hand, her expression calm. "So, what now?" I asked. She smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "Now, we build something new." I nodded. For the first time, I believed that was possible. We weren't healed yet, but we were free. And maybe that was enough for now. Life doesn't always give us the closure we want. Sometimes healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live with the scars. I spent years believing I was powerless, trapped in a home that never felt like mine. But the truth is, freedom isn't given. It's taken. We don't heal overnight. The past lingers. The pain echoes. But we move forward anyway. Because strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up every time we do. If this story spoke to you, if you believe in resilience, in reclaiming your voice, then stay. There's more to share, more to heal, more to grow. Subscribe, and let's walk this journey together.